Thank you very much, and welcome to a regular meeting of Council for May the 14th, 2018. We acknowledge we're on the lands of the Lekwungen-speaking people, the traditional territories of the Coast and Strait Salish people today, specifically known as the Songhees and the Esquimalt, and that their historic connection continues to this day. Also, be aware that the proceedings tonight are being video recorded and also live streamed. So, having said all of that, I call the meeting to order. We do have an amended agenda. We'll start at item number 2, which is the open portion of the meeting. We have council meetings and special council, item number 2 and 3, and I understand we can pass them all at once if we so choose.
Move approval of council meeting of April 23rd, special council meetings of May 2nd and May 8th.
Thank you very much.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any corrections, changes, questions? Seeing none, any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. My remarks are relatively brief tonight. That clock is it's a little bit slow, and I received notice that our town clock on the avenue is not working perfectly either. So so we might have 3 or 4 different times throughout our community, and maybe we'll change into some subsets of time zones maybe. The first is this is actually the time of year as things wind down in a lot of organizations where volunteers gather to be recognized and thanked. And I was, for instance, recently up at the Emmanuel Baptist Church to celebrate their volunteers who provide dinners for University of Victoria students once a week throughout the term. I was at the Monterey Volunteers Recognition Night along with Councillor Braithwaite the other night, and giving out not only thanks to the volunteers but recognizing some long-serving ones. There was 2 of them that were 20 years serving at Monterey. We have Oak Bay Volunteer Services meeting tomorrow to celebrate their volunteers, and we meet Thursday night municipally to recognize and thank the people who've volunteered for our committees, our boards, and our commissions. So we thank all of those people, and I don't think we could have a community as vibrant and as joyful as ours without all of those people pitching in. So we thank them. I attended and helped open the music festivals put on by the school board. Music in the air, music everywhere, and we were graced with the first of the outdoor in the park ones being in Willows. I think they'd had one maybe earlier that day, I think up in Beacon Hill, and it was absolutely wonderful. We had Monterey, Willows, and Oak Bay High School represented, but it goes on till the 16th, so I urge you to go on to the website and see where these other wonderful free concerts are. And it's a nice kickoff to music in the park, which will go on throughout our summer here and put on by us. I was asked to attend and help launch Ride Don't Hide. The Canadian Mental Health Association, British Columbia, Canada for that matter. I think it's right across Canada, upwards to over 50 towns and villages are holding these events. It's a fundraiser, but more importantly, it's a raiser for awareness. And that was launched. It's June, later on in June. Let me ask Councillor Kirby the actual date, 24th or 23rd? She's searching for it. I should have written it down, and I apologize. So while we're hanging, I just wanted to also recognize one of the people who helped launch it the day later in a bit of an event over at the Steve Nash Gym was 24th. Okay, thank you. The 24th is the ride. It starts at Windsor, but one of the local merchants, local resident Neil Patterson, is hoping to get 100 riders on his team, which will represent one rider for each of the 100 years that Canadian Mental Health Association has been formed. So I urge anyone who's interested to look that up. Councillor Kirby has a team for Counsel. Looks like there'll be a firefighters team and other teams from our community. So it's a great event, and it's a great way. We know there's been mental health issues and addiction issues raised in our community over the last couple of weeks, and it is a way to lift the stigma and move forward together. And last but certainly not least, the Spring Nosh was on Saturday. I think this is the third annual. I noticed there was one last year, and they might have been an unofficial one the year before. So it was absolutely wonderful. A variety of merchants in the West Village gathered, served food, and it was just spectacular. So we hope that's going to become an ongoing event, much like the Tea Party has been going for over 50 years. So we thank the British Columbia, BIA, the Business Improvement Association, for putting this on. And when I suggested it be done weekly, the president and the organizer said no chance of that, because it's a big undertaking, but certainly it will be an annual event. It was absolutely wonderful. And I know a number of councillors were there enjoying the wonderful food and camaraderie. So the next is the public participation period. This is a 20-minute period, which I should talk about that. Yep. I should have. There was one other area I was just reminded that I had it in mind, but I hadn't written it down. The Yes Awards were this past week. They're absolutely wonderful awards which recognize young students from our local schools and their wonderful achievements. There was a number. We sponsored one. Merchants and other groups and families sponsored others, and it really was wonderful to see and hear the stories of the young people who had great achievements and overcome, in many instances, great challenges to excel. So I want to thank Councillor Braithwaite for organizing that, and I know Councillor Murdoch and myself made presentations, and we also heard from Councillor Kirby that evening. Well attended, and certainly it's a great event which highlights the exceptional young stars that we have in our community. So thank you very much. Thanks, Councillor Murdoch, for reminding me of that. Now we go on to the public participation. 20 minutes from the first speaker. We have each speaker is entitled to three minutes. We'd ask you to let us know your name and the municipality of residence. You should also write that on a form that we have at the podium. And keep your remarks brief. Perhaps start by telling us what the topic is. When I say welcome, that means from that welcome on you have 3 minutes. And when you hear the beeper, please wrap up whatever sentence you're on at that point. As I said, a total 20 minutes. Address all comments through me, please. So it's internet time. It's 1909. So can we hear from the first speaker first, please? Anyone wish to come forward? Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. Oh, it's this one. Okay.
Yeah, you might have to lift that up a little bit.
That's fine. I can make it work.
Name?
Kyle Kerr.
Topic?
Mr. Murdoch's, or Councillor Murdoch's proposal regarding the speculation tax.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for the opportunity to speak. My name is Kyle Kerr. I am here representing the Victoria Real Estate Board. I am serving as the president for 2018. As I said, we are here to support Councillor Murdoch's proposal regarding the speculation tax, and we are asking that Oak Bay ask for this tax not to be levied in our region. Last month, the Minister of Finance went on record with her intent to devalue homes in our area. The speculation tax is but one measure the province intends to use to chip away at homeowner equity. So as a resident of Oak Bay, why should you be concerned? Well, the answer is simple. You cannot reduce the value of a speculator's home without affecting all home values. Artificially reducing home prices would be detrimental to our community, and here is how. Developers will not build, which will add to our already constrained supply problem. Financing will become more difficult to acquire. Reduced home prices will lead to more competition and more demand and push prices back beyond where they are now in a short amount of time. And our indirect service sector, so many restaurants, renovators, people, when home equity is starting to be taken out of their home, people stop to spend as much money. And there's lots of businesses here in Oak Bay which get a lot of ancillary business from the real estate sector. The fact is, this tax isn't a speculation tax at all. It does not tax pre-sales or assignments, and the majority of the properties targeted do not fit the definition of affordable housing stock. It is important to note that the proposed changes are based on a market that occurred in 2016, 2 years ago. This year and last year's values have slowed. Rising interest rates and new qualification rules for mortgages have already eased demand. The government wants to lessen the economy's reliance on the real estate industry, but wouldn't a more positive way to be to increase and support other industries? We are communicating our ideas with the provincial government on other ways to increase their tax revenues and create affordable housing that are sustainable and can fit into our existing communities. We must also remember the government has already collected $2.2 billion in transfer tax last year. There is lots of revenue there to help support affordable housing. We are asking for our area to be allowed to be successful and to thrive, to encourage sustainable development across the CRD and find new and innovative ways to supply housing affordability to the market without having to implement a tax. Municipalities can help too. By streamlining their review and approval processes, we can find creative ways to house people. So we please ask for your support in requesting Oak Bay be exempt from this tax and to follow up with your request to get more information from the Ministry of Finance. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hello,
Name,
Isabella Lee,
community,
Oak Bay,
and topic.
Mr. Murdoch's motion.
Welcome.
Thank you. So we're in a housing crisis. My name is Isabella Lee, and I'm a third-year university student at UVic. I've lived in Oak Bay since I was 6 months old. We moved to a house near Estevan when I was first born, and then to a house right near Carnarvon Park now. But as it is right now, I have no way of being able to buy into the market that it is. I will never be able to afford a house as it is right now, especially in this neighborhood, which is so upsetting to me because Oak Bay is a community of family and friends. It's what I love about living here. I feel that being part of a community means being responsible for helping our neighbors and looking out for one another. And that's why I'm speaking against this motion. This tax the BC government put forward is so minimal. It's important to keep in mind the actual rates are going to be 2% for non-Canadians, 1% for Canadians outside of British Columbia, and 0.5% for BC residents. This means that if you live in a home in BC of a minimum of 6 months out of the year, you would only pay 0.5% on a secondary home within the region, which is so tightly defined as Metro Vancouver and the CRD, minus the Gulf Islands and the Juan de Fuca Strait. This would ensure houses in our community can become homes to people that need them. The motion here presented tonight fails to take into account the legislation laid out by the BC government is not the cabin tax it was at the start of the year, but a refined legislation approach to fixing our housing crisis. The details of this tax have been revised. The consultation of this motion demands has already been done and resulted in changes. This letter isn't about consultation, but obstructionism towards our responsibility as a community to be part of the solution to the biggest problem facing us today, which is our housing crisis. Not only does speculation in our housing market hurt our communities, but empty homes aren't communities at all. I feel like Oak Bay is such a special place because it has always been somewhere where young families and friends are all together, and a place where family and friends come first, communities come first. This can't happen if we continue to close our doors to the people around us. We need to be a part of the solution. The solution goes beyond just Oak Bay, but to every other municipality spread over British Columbia. If this motion passes, we're going to be part of the problem and not working towards the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other speakers? Okay, come forward, please.
Andrew Stinson, Oak Bay, and I will be speaking on the topic that I believe most people will be speaking on tonight.
Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to bring forward some ideas for Council when it considers the motion coming up at the end of the agenda. And I believe the questions that are asked in the resolution by Councillor Murdoch are very good questions, but I think they're more technical in nature. They're more on how will this tax be taken, how will this tax actually happen instead of should this tax be done in the first place. And I don't really believe that Council should be denying the tax based on technicality. They should be really denying the tax based on whether this is the right policy to take. And some of the statements that is brought forward in the motion do address this, and I would just like to go through a few of them. For the third motion in the whereas, it mentions the UBCM report, Home for Everyone, and it warns that there's it warns of a risk on new taxation measures. And perhaps Councillor Murdoch, when he's introducing the motion at the end of the meeting, he can clarify this point a little bit more, because when I went through the report, it says that taxation measures to address both foreign and domestic speculation should be considered to stabilize housing prices. So maybe a little clarification, at least for me, would be helpful. Going further down the list is that an important concern over seniors looking to move here in stages. And from a last meeting, we also had speakers worrying about the property value going down if they're investing in the market. And I don't think we should be preventing people from moving here in stages. I think that's a great thing. And as Councillor Murdoch suggests, there's a great volunteerism from our retiree community. But if someone purchases a house and is going to move here in 5 or 10 years, that denies that house from being used. It takes it out of the housing stock. And what I think Council should consider is that the reason why people want to come and retire here in the first place is because of the community. And it's because it's a mosaic of people that are from different generational, from different financial, and different social backgrounds. And that's one of the reasons why people pay a premium to live here. And I haven't really seen any evidence that is going to point out that by having this tax, it's going to destroy that sense of community we see. And I agree with Mr. Kerr in that the houses that are being sold and they're being held for the potentially speculative reasons are not affordable housing, but that's not the only use for a house. It can also be rented out. And when you have houses being held as an investment or held vacant, it denies that from being rented out from someone that's in a different financial situation. My neighbors, they don't own their house. They rent out the house. The owner owns the house as an investment. He could have left that house vacant. He could have left it and let it sit there, but instead he rented it out, and he is able to avoid the tax for that purpose, and our neighbors are able to live in and contribute to our community. Finally, I think one thing that's kind of not been brought up in this debate is the ability for this tax to combat Airbnbs, because the way the tax is set up, it would disincentivize short-term rentals. It would disincentivize people from purchasing a condo or a house and renting it out on Airbnb, making mini hotels out of condominiums. And so I think that's another facet that Council should be considering whether it wants to oppose the measures in this tax. I think there will be people that will be hit, but I think the way it causes further pressure on the rental market, I would caution against going against the tax. Thank you.
Very much. Thank you. Go. Anybody else wish to address us? Thank you.
Excuse me, Jake Richardson, Oak Bay. Now that we have all seen the Oak Bay United Church development plans, okay, I want to say a few words about Threshold House. I'm going to read this because it's been about 30 years since I've done any public speaking, and I'm a little bit nervous.
We'll start the clock in that case. Welcome.
Okay. As you know, the District of Oak Bay is committed to being part of the Streets to Homes Housing First solution. Threshold House is only 23 years old, and as a building has finally found its highest and best use. It provides 8 semi-independent suites for youth at risk and common area space for programs to assist the tenants making the transition to independent living. Oak Bay United Church lauded its excellence when the 5-year leasehold was announced in 2016. Oak Bay Council granted a permissive exemption, proving its commitment to the Housing First solution. The church collects $5,500 rental income per month from Threshold House, And Threshold House is responsible for all utilities, insurance, service contracts, routine and minor maintenance. They also advanced up to $100,000 for major maintenance at the inception of the lease, which has 3 years to run. Threshold House is architecturally sympathetic to the neighbourhood. It creates an excellent buffer between the adjacent single-family home and the church parking lot. It is truly transitional housing at its best for its function, its purpose, integration into the neighbourhood, and sustainability. I believe it would be environmentally, socially, and I dare say perhaps financially irresponsible for BC Housing and the church to sanction the demolition of this building. Threshold House is a good neighbour, everything that Oak Bay espouses. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other speakers? Any other speakers? Any other speakers? None? Thank you very much. Thanks for those who've come up and added to our community dialogue. We're going to go on to item number 6, which is the advisory design panel minutes from April 3rd.
Move receipt.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded to receive the minutes. Does anyone have any discussions or points? Seeing none, call the question. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. Heritage Commission minutes, April 10th.
Move receipt. Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? None opposed. General election 2018, appointment of officials. The recommendation is there to appoint Ms. Hopkins, wave. That's Ms. Hopkins.
Move.
And to be the Chief Electoral Officer, and Mr. Jones, sitting next to her, the Deputy Chief Election Officer. So a bit of a role reversal there.
Move. Move the recommendation.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you. We have now a series of the next 3 items are very similar. It relates to a special procedure under Section 57 of the act that governs us, and that is the Community Charter. This is a notice of registration on land titles. So what I'm going to ask Mr. Jones to do is just to give us a little overview on the practice. Certainly something that we have done in Oak Bay in the past. It's not something we do frequently, but can you just give us a very high-level review of what this process is? And then I will be asking if the owners of any of these properties are here, and if they wish to address us once Mr. Jones is finished. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the next 4 reports are recommendations that Council ask that staff register a notice under Section 57 of the Community Charter in relation to the 4 properties listed. Essentially, what this does is put a notice on title that tells people with interest in the property that there is a concern from the district that construction has occurred without permits or without all approvals that are required. So just for the benefit of the audience, we have a continuum of processes that we use in the event that we feel as staff that construction has occurred without the proper approvals. So the first is that we ask people to voluntary comply. So if something happens, we go out to a property and say, oh, just so you know, you need a permit for this, you need to come in and do that. The second would be that we have the ability to issue stop work orders. So construction's happening at a particular property, we see that, and we've received complaints, and we issue a stop work order. The third kind of process in the continuum is the issuance of tickets. So we're able to issue tickets to fine people that have not followed the appropriate process. The next level of continuum is what we're having here today. And this is to have registered on title a note saying that we know that construction has occurred without the necessary approvals of the regional district. Sorry, that's my old life. The district. The fourth option that you actually have available to you is a court order. Now, that's a very long and very expensive process. So the goal of staff is to come forward with council and say, we think at this stage we should issue or request that a notice of title be issued against the property. Council could choose, if it wanted to go that further distance, but recognize that that's a very significant cost to get that court order. So at the end of the day, the goal of this process is to reduce the liability of the district by ensuring that people that have an interest in the property are aware that construction has occurred without the appropriate approvals. So that's our intent today. Now, there is, if a property owner chooses to continue to work with the district, we could, at a future date, remove that notice. That would be at the expense of the property owner. But if they were to come in compliance with our bylaws, they could do that. So this evening, there's 4 of these items before you, and we have Ms. Jensen and our bylaw enforcement officer slash building inspector, Mr. Ed Bugars, here that can speak in more detail to these items. And as the chair suggested, when each one of these come up, it would be appropriate to invite, if any of the property owners were here, to come up and speak to the item and present their views. So, Your Worship, happy to try to respond to any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jones. And not only do we have the 2 staff here who can answer, but each one of these requests for a Section 57 notice on title comes also with its own report as to the history and how we got to this stage. So let's start with the first one, item number 9, 167 Barkley Terrace. Is the owner here? The owner is not here. Does council have any questions of staff? Go ahead, Councillor Murdoch.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Just a couple of questions. There is a letter from 167 Barkley Terrace is in our package to talk to it. But I'm just curious, are there other options available to us as council in these situations? I'm thinking, I know my understanding was in the past we have actually gone in and removed illegal work done. Is that primarily done for a health and safety situation, or is that available? Is there, in situations where we know what's been done, but at what point do the fines kick in, and when do they kick off again? And is that a discretion of council, or is that just we only issue 1 ticket per item? And is there any impact of ignoring the stop work orders on any of the contractors that are under that situation? Like, do we grant them business licenses or review them any more thoroughly if they're ignoring our stop work orders?
So, Your Worship, I won't remember all those questions, but I'll try to respond. So, you can move forward with a requirement to deconstruct something that's been constructed. That is, in normal case, a court order. So it's a very significant process and cost, to be honest, to the district. And there may be cases at council's discretion where it might want to proceed along that lines. I only remembered one question, sorry.
It's okay. I'm just curious about where do the fines fit in that list there? You said the fines are applied. Are they applied continually, or is it, how is that actually done?
That's a really good question. So what we would normally do, and we've done this in a number of cases, is issue a fine for if we observe work occurring without a permit, and we can continue to issue those fines, in fact, on a daily basis if we notice the work continuing. We are limited in our resources here at the district, so to be honest, we don't have the ability to go out and monitor all these properties regularly. If there are problem properties, we'll call them problem properties, then we would. But at the end of the day, the cost of, my personal view, the cost of paying those fines for a lot of people may be not a concern, and that construction occurs to completion, and we just continue to use our efforts to bring people in to compliance without success. So this is kind of the next step, and the impact of this, it's hard to say. Making future property owners aware of work being constructed without necessary compliance with bylaws could have an impact for property owners.
Thank you. And the last question of that was just, is there any impact on the contractors themselves doing the work if they're doing it contrary to a stop work order?
Your Worship, we could issue a ticket to the contractors as well, and I'm not aware of how many of those we might have done.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Murdoch, you had mentioned right at the outset we've sent in people to deconstruct. Did you say that at the top of your questions?
Not in the time I have been on council, but
Oh, okay.
I've certainly heard of that being done where there's been requirement to take down. So I think it's been mostly in health and safety situations, is my understanding. But it hasn't been in my term on council. But I was it wasn't listed in the list of options. But you did clarify that it was available under a court order, which was the fourth item you mentioned. So thank you.
Yeah, I don't recall us ever seeking a court order to undo anything like that. I think over the years, we've had significant compliance. But it may have been before my time also. Councillor Braithwaite, you had some questions? And then
Yes, thank you.
Zelko.
I just to kind of go on some of those things. So I just want to make sure this is clear in my head. If Councillor Croft built something on his house, and I lived next door to him, and what he built was outside of what the bylaw allowed, and he had a Section 57 put against him, but he elected not to do anything about it, and just lived there until he decided to sell his house. And so I, as his neighbor, who follow all the rules because I'm a good citizen, what happens when he sells his house? I mean, he can sell his house and still that bylaw infraction can stay there, even be passed on to the next owner, or will that have to come down at the sale of the house?
Really good question. That notice on title travels with the property. So a future property owner would normally look at if there's any I'll say notices on title that might impact them, and there would be perhaps a dialogue amongst the seller and the purchaser whether that's an impact.
If I may, just to continue. So, but really, in essence, he could sell that house to Councillor Murdoch, and Councillor Murdoch could continue having that house in exactly the same state, and I would still be, as that good neighbor, having to deal with that bylaw infraction.
That's correct.
So there's, to me, that there's an essence of unfairness in there, that if someone does follow the rules and and goes with all of it builds within the bylaw, and their next door neighbor doesn't, all they have is a little slap on the hand and a little ticket that they have to pay, and then something on title that may or may not cause them to have a little bit of angst when they sell their house.
Your Worship, so I guess it depends on the circumstance, and there will be impacts in some places, and there may not be in others. Again, this is just a tool that we have that, to be honest, we hope that this encourages people to bring their properties into compliance. It may or it may not, and whether there is an impact financially or otherwise on the property owners, I guess will only be determined at the time they sell their property.
Thank you. And just along that line, it's been known to affect remortgaging?
Your Worship, I am not going to comment on that.
My experience has been when people have had these on, getting a new mortgage becomes problematic.
The underwriter at the mortgage company would review that, and any charges on title, they would ask questions. They might not loan on that amount. So
Okay, that's a voice from the audience agrees. Let the record show, because they can't hear you. The live streaming people just, it was quiet. No, we're not at that stage yet, no. But maybe you can weigh in on that with your experience. Councillor Zelka?
Thank you very much, Chair. Very happy to see that staff is working through a graduated process in the enforcement of our bylaws, and I very much appreciate how it's a gentle, for lack of a better word, escalation to just remind those who pay our salary that we're here to pass bylaws on their behalf and reflecting the values of the community, and that we're all in this together. It's not meant to be punitive. It's simply just that these are the norms of the community. So I really appreciate how staff is being very careful, and I can see from the dates of the various letters, incredibly patient, since I think the first date I saw on this one is it 2015 or 2016 is the first interaction on this one with respect to 167 Barkley Terrace. It's been, let's just say it's been a number of years. It's been a number of years. So I do have a few questions specifically related to this one. Regarding fines, I understand the fines is simply to stop certain behaviors, such as stop building. I can understand if the building's already done, there's not much a fine may do in that respect, but in this respect, the first question I have for staff is how much fines have already been imposed in this case?
At this time, there was 2 tickets issued on that for contravention of stop work order, a total of $300.
Thank you. The next question I want to ask is, I understand the process we're going through here in terms of a Section 57 process, putting something on title, and I fully appreciate the comments brought forward by Councillor Braithwaite, how this may not necessarily make the neighbors nearby incredibly happy, since there may not be actual action occurring until possibly the sale of the house. So I would like to ask, what might be the process, and I have to ask because I don't know, where we would finally go to court order for something like this?
So, Your Worship, we would actually apply to the court for an order requiring the property owner to deconstruct what they have constructed. Again, very significant cost to the municipality, but there may be times when council deems that it's appropriate to move in that direction.
Thank you. Just one more further comment, if I may, Chair. I very much appreciate, again, the approach taken from the principles of our Constitution of peace, order, and good government. I really see that with respect to land usage, this is an attempt to very gently but very firmly try and have good government and good relations amongst all of our citizens. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Croft, did you want to say anything about your knowledge in terms of how it might impact the transfer of property?
Well, I think there's three things. Not only is there the financing, either a refinance or a purchase, that the banks would not look favorably upon a notice on title. You've also got a property disclosure statement that would have to be completed and signed off, which would notify it. If you took this to your lawyer, I doubt that your lawyer would be very happy to have you purchase a property that has a notice on. The insurer, your insurance agent, would not be happy to have that on there because they don't know what it all means, so they might not provide insurance. So I think in many ways a sale would be frustrated by having a notice on title that people would normally, from my experience, they finally do bring the property up to code, do the work that has to be done, take the work out before they're able to sell their home.
Okay, so what we need is a motion to approve this notice going on title.
So moved, the recommendation.
Moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. There were some people who came in a little late. We're dealing with 167 Barkley Terrace. Does anyone wish, is the owner? No, you're not the owners, okay. Thank you very much. Now, speaking to the motion, Councillor Kirby, then Councillor Murdoch, please.
I just wanted to raise the fact that this came before us a couple of times, and that the homeowner did their best to come up with something that was a happy medium that would satisfy the neighbor, and in the end did do that. And it's not a health and safety concern. There were drawings done by an architect and an engineer, signed off on the deck as well, and they did raise some valid points in their letter that give me pause. And had things turned out a little differently at the committee of the whole meeting and all council been present, they might not be in this position. It just gives me some concern that things could have fallen apart for them. They were led to believe that a spot zoning was a possibility, and it didn't turn out. I just feel bad that this has gotten to this place, because it's not a health and safety concern. It's not somebody's putting anybody's life in danger, and all the neighbors are satisfied. So it seems a little unfair. But I do understand that we have our process, and this is a slow and fair process. But in this case, I don't know, I struggle with it a little bit.
Cool. But my recollection on this is that we have certain powers of granting variances, but this particular situation did not fall within that. Is that correct, Ms. Jensen? Is that my recall? Because this was a number of years ago we dealt with it. That was looked at as a possibility, but its variance was not possible under the circumstances.
No, that's correct. They were in fact exceeding their floor area ratio, so they needed to go through a rezoning process.
Yep. And it's the provincial legislation that prevents us granting variances under those circumstances. So, Councillor Murdoch, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just one question of staff. The Section 57 covenant, I don't want this, this is sort of a balance between punitive enough to change behavior, but not so punitive that it punishes people and allows them to kind of make changes as time goes on. What is the nature of a Section 57 covenant? Does it actually detail the nature of the non-compliance? Because there's a big difference between a health and safety violation or something of a major factor versus it exceeds the floor area ratio by 0.25% or something. Does it lay it out on the notice of title?
So, Your Worship, it would be similar to what you see in the reports that are highlighted in italics. Generally, though, we are aware that construction has occurred without a permit. And for staff, we're not going to make a judgment on the degree of safety as a result of that permit not being issued or applied for. And so we simply don't know, because those, and we're not going to go and look at a particular property without a permit, engineering drawings, that type of thing. So we are unable to say that construction is safe.
I appreciate that, Ash. That's a very good answer, Mr. Warren. So I guess, there's a couple of things I would like to see here. One, Mr. Jones. Your name, whatever it is, it's all good. I think that the way you've laid out here to move towards a resolution goal is excellent. I think that, we shouldn't be here trying to wag our fingers too much. I mean, these things happen for all kinds of reasons, and I think some are legitimate, some not. Our job is to how strongly to enforce the laws. I think, and this is a good example of one of those difficult ones where I think they didn't do anything malicious or anything else. It was just, the reality is that it was larger than the bylaws allow. And, my lesson I took from this was that houses should not be built to 99.999% of the maximum allowable size, because very reasonable requests of us are not possible when that happens. So I think that's fair. I think that answered a lot of my questions in terms of the impact of this. Thank you.
Just to clarify, Mr. Jones, you said the italics, is those the italics contained in paragraph 1 under analysis? Those ones? Is that what you're referring to, is what would be on the notice? Page 2 of 4.
Sorry, Your Worship.
Under the title analysis, page 2 of 4? Or actually, yeah, in your report 2 of 4. Okay, thank you. And in this case, I think the construction was done with the knowledge that it was improper. Whether or not you describe that as malicious, I don't know. But the first company who, my recollection of the facts, the first company would not do it because they said, we can't do it. That company didn't carry out the contract, and it was a second company that did.
So, Your Worship, just to clarify, if you look at the final recommendation...
What's in the italics there?
Well, the recommendation, I think they're similar, but that would be what would be issued on title.
Okay, so kind of a boilerplate item, which doesn't specify what there was. Okay. Councillor Zelka, I think you had your hand up, wanted to make a comment on this, and then I think we're ready for the question.
Actually, discussion on the motion that's on the floor, please. With respect to the motion, if anyone at the council table has a concern about the seriousness or lack of seriousness of this particular issue, the time to have brought that forward would have been on May 23rd, 2017, when Council denied the zoning amendment application of this particular issue. And Council, in its majority and its wisdom, denied. So this is a natural outcome of that. So I just wanted to simply point that out. Number 2 is, I noticed in the correspondence from the owner a suggestion that our builder and architect said blah, 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 and that in hindsight that advice was bad. I wonder out loud whether a civil case independent of us might be possible, that in terms of the owner being made whole. But that's up to them, up to the owner. That's got nothing to do with us. The third thing I wanted to point out was I muse out loud about a possible council policy change with respect to our volunteers. I worry that some of our volunteers, as I notice some of the names with respect to the contractors on this particular file, we may be celebrating their assistance with us. I don't know the details, but I wonder whether we may want to change our council policy with respect to volunteers so that any contractor that's involved in a Section 57 issue where something was built outside of a building permit, we might want to exclude them from being eligible for any volunteer position as one way of just simply letting it known that we're watching. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to call a question. All in favor? Opposed? Not opposed. The next item is 2072 Carnarvon. Is the owner here? Then, yes, do you wish to address us on this issue, sir? Yes, please. All right, if you would come forward, state your name, and tell us what you have to say. And you've read the report?
I have read the report, sir.
Thank you very much.
Sorry. It's my first time ever.
Yeah, you might have to lift that up a little bit. Have the whole thing comes up. Oops. Here we go.
I'll break it. Yes. First and foremost, thank you for allowing me to be here today. A little nervous. This is the first time I've ever had to address council on any kind of matter like this. My grandfather and my father were raised in Oak Bay, and it was my dream to bring my family to Oak Bay. And in 2015, we did so. It took 20 years of hard work to be able to do so. I had envisioned purchasing a home and building a home that had a proper lifestyle for my family, that I could also create a home for my aging parents as well if they wanted to come home. So, with the sanction and guidance of a contractor, I wanted to build a deck on the back of my house, as well as put a wall in my basement so I could create a couple extra rooms. And that's the reason I'm here. I have a letter that I printed for council, if I can distribute it, one for each.
You can just give them all and we can pass them along.
So we have been notified by the bylaw enforcement of Oak Bay that it has been recommended to register our property with a bylaw contravention notice as per section 57 of the community charter. My wife and I are grateful for the opportunity to represent our case to council. We've tried to work out solutions with the Department for Building and Planning, but had no success in reaching any dialogue thus far. The bylaw officers that we've dealt with, I'd like to say right now on record, are cordial, polite, professional, and did their job well. I have no grievances whatsoever towards any of them and the way they acted. They were polite with my family when I wasn't there and with my children, so I have no grievances towards them. The original complaint dated October 3rd, 2016 was not the complaint that I received in the letter, which I quote, specifically the complaints regard to a basement that was renovated, a deck that was constructed, and the decommissioning of a covered parking zone. No permits or other approvals were applied for or issued by the district. When we constructed these, we acted in good faith, but ignorantly, and for that I apologize. The original complaint made no mention of a deck or decommissioning of a covered parking area. These were added later, after the original inspection was completed. The reason I believe that this complaint came about was because we had an irate neighbor that complained of a noise violation due to 2 Japanese English students that were living with us. The police came 3 times and it's on record. They found no noise. And I'm not quite sure exactly how they were making noise because we couldn't hear them in our own house. 3 times the police came and I believe there was no resolution for our neighbor, so she took another route. And it was at this point in time that we found out that we had done something we shouldn't have, which was build without a permit. We thought we were under the impression we could do these things without a permit. Upon the first visit of the bylaw officer, it was identified that the basement needed to have a free and flowing area so that the foreign students living with us could make access to the house and be with it. We complied. We were also told to decommission the garage. We complied. These were not mentioned in the letter that we received 2 weeks ago. In addition to this, I also stated that I wanted to keep the deck because I wanted to make sure that I had access to the backyard as easy as I could for the children, as well as for the family. It was more usage in the backyard than anything. And that I would seek professional assistance and input onto how we could go about making sure that I could find a way to not only comply, but to see if there was a way I could have this deck built in the backyard. I was told there is no variance. That was the answer. It wasn't a matter of what the solution was or how I could go about doing it. I was just told there is no variance. Through the professional advice, they told me to apply for a variance. And I went ahead and I tried to apply for a variance. Now, it's not clear what the process is in terms of applying for a variance, but I did my research and I tried to communicate with the city of the District of Oak Bay. And when I applied for the variance, I was told that I first initially inquired to what the process of applying for a variance would be, without indicating what the actual variance request was going to be. The request for the process was returned to the bylaw officer, who then told me I could not apply for a variance. But I had not even stated what type of variance I was trying to apply for yet. It made me question whether there was a process involved at all, or how I could, I didn't know what to do at that point in time. I still seek to find a way that I can bring that into compliance with the house. I want to live in Oak Bay. I'm going to live in Oak Bay. I want to retire here. This is my home, and I plan to be here for a very long time. All in all, I have letters from my surrounding neighbors that all support the usage and the presence of the deck, including the one that initially complained in the first place. It's built well. It's built with aesthetic appeal. It's built strong and safe. It looks good. You know, there's no question in terms of its construction or in its aesthetic nature. I would just like to see if there's a way I could continue having dialogue with the city to find a way through future construction or through future renovations, which we plan on doing with our home, to somehow bring it into compliance so that I can work with the city of Bay and enjoy a lifestyle that we are looking for. I don't believe I have anything left to add, so thank you.
Thank you very much. I think what's been requested is an opportunity to sit down and meet with our staff to see and maybe get a better understanding of is there a compliance route. And it may well be, sir, that this is similar to the previous one at 167 Barkley, which we were unable to bring it into compliance with a variance. We were just, by provincial legislation, did not allow us to grant. But I think under what certainly I've heard, we've all heard up here tonight, is you want that opportunity. So I think it's only fair. So I'm going to suggest that we put this over until, with council's agreement, 2 weeks now, and put it back and defer it to one council meeting. You can have that conversation, and staff can walk you through what, if any avenues are, if there are any. That's one suggestion at this point, because obviously the owner wants to have that opportunity.
I'm wondering if staff have anything to say in response to the owner's message to us today. You know, do you have plans? Is this similar to Barkley, where it is actually a rezoning application because the site coverage, the FAR is too great? And if it's that, then we can't go down the road that's being suggested, that we actually need to treat it the same way as we just did with Barkley Terrace. I just wondered if you could provide some input, Ms. Jensen.
Ms. Jensen.
That's correct. With the addition of the deck to the building, it actually exceeded the floor area ratio for this property. So the maximum for a site in this zone is 0.4, and they're at 0.425. So there is no opportunity for variance.
Okay. The reason I suggested is that we put it over is that so that can be part of the education process, so the owner can have a better understanding of that as a potential dead end. Councillor Zalka, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think your suggestion is a good one, and at the appropriate time, I'd be fine to put forward a notice to defer or to motion to defer to the not table, but defer.
I think this would be the appropriate place, because otherwise we're going to get into the merits.
I do have a comment to say first. I did want to ask, from a place of possible avenues, I know that rezoning may not be possible, but I don't know about heritage alteration permits, but if, I don't know how old this building is, but through various heritage processes, through designation and those sorts of things, might adjustments possibly be made for things like this, is a question I would have through you to staff.
Yeah, I hear it's a question. I just don't want to be in a situation where we're kind of asking staff for opinions and options, and I think it would be better if that kind of discussion, I mean, on those points, without any answers from staff tonight, but that can form part of any discussions, and
So I'd like
all
to-
options can be looked at, including the ones that you've just mentioned.
If I could move that we then defer to
Defer
the
for
next
2
council
weeks.
meeting.
Okay. Should it be to a date specific, Mr. Jones, or?
Your Worship, we are bringing 3 more of these forward to council at the June
Okay.
meeting. So if it were council's wish to talk to the property owner, we could do that over the next couple of weeks and see what happens with that. Again, I think there's some challenges, but we could certainly have that dialogue, and we could report further in June.
Okay, fair enough. So it wouldn't be it would be deferred till the next occasion. Okay.
Correct.
Moved and seconded, I heard. Yes, discussions on the deferral. Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite, please.
Actually, my discussion is not around the deferral, but it was a comment that I was hoping to make, or a question to ask prior to this motion being put on the table.
I think we have to deal with the motion, and if the motion is defeated, we'll go on to your question.
But
Because otherwise, that question probably is at a time when we come back, I suspect. Okay. You also had your hand up, Councillor Croft and Councillor.
I'm just wondering if the correct motion is to table this, not to defer it. What's the difference between deferring and tabling? I just don't.
Mr. Jones? One is debatable and the other isn't. That's
Your
how
Worship, Your Worship, we would expect if council wanted to give a bit of time for us to talk to the property owner. Again, we are bringing back 3 more of these items at the June meeting. We could add this particular property to that agenda and let you know if we've made progress or not. If we didn't make progress, we would be recommending the same as we did tonight.
Okay. Councillor Murdoch, please. And Councillor, anyone else? Okay.
I just thank you through you, Chair, so I'm clear on what it is that we're bringing back here. Because there's in this letter it talks about the work that has been done. So just for our clarity, the work has been done to restore the garage and to address the issues in the basement. To this point, it's really just the deck outstanding. Is that accurate in terms of where we're at right now in terms of referring to staff?
Yes, that is correct, Councillor Murdoch.
Okay. All right.
It's a very dramatic pause you took there. I was just,
Any other
thank you.
discussion? And this is a motion to refer it back to staff, and perhaps that can be incorporated, that information can be incorporated into the updated report. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. So, thank you, sir. You'll have an opportunity to have that dialogue that you requested, and it'll be brought back the first council meeting in June. Okay, thank you. Move on to 2727 Fowl Bay. Are the owners here? The owners are not here. Are there any questions that specific to this particular application that council has? Seeing none, I invite a motion to approve the placement of a Section 57 notice on title.
Move staff recommendation.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you. 3492 Henderson. Are the owners here? Yes, thank you very much. Do you wish an opportunity to address us, sir? Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Come forward. State your name. We know your address. Have you had a chance to see the report?
No, sir.
Okay. Did you want an opportunity to do that before you address us?
I don't think it would.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
David Lin, Oak Bay, 3492 Henderson Road.
Welcome.
Hi. I just want to apologize and to the chair for taking time to deal with this matter with us. Originally, this was trying to light some work that was done without permits. This was prior to us purchasing the property. Since we were raised awareness of these items, We have since worked with a contractor and submitted a building plan. From here, it's dated in March 9th. I can have our good neighbor here to verify that.
I'm not sure how that's going to, yeah, we'll just take your word for it on that one. Thank you.
And then since working with him and submitting the permits and then later realizing how much it was going to cost, we simply weren't able to afford proceeding with the project at that time. Since then, we have the permit. We weren't aware that the permit lasts a year. It's in our interest to bring the property up to code and the standards of the BC codes and etc. So it won't be an issue. Like for you guys, it's a headache for you. It's a headache for myself too. And just apologize for to the officers on the lack of activity. We are currently working with a contractor, and we do have a new plan. We're just working the details out. He said we can be able to submit this new plan in 10 days. So I'm just seeking to postpone the Section 57 until our new building permits is reviewed. Currently, the house is vacated, so the work can be done. Some of the fines we received are such as garbage and grass. I have brought pictures for council on how it is now. So we've planted seeds, and the seeds are budding. So we paid our fines already, and then just wanting to let you guys know that it's being looked at. Like we do want to comply, and we just simply didn't have the money to. It is a project that we weren't aware of, and then we didn't have the budget for. So we're gonna go ahead, and we've taken a line of credit for the house. So things are in its way. It just happens that the meeting today is prior to us able to file our section building permit. And apologize again, I didn't realize the building permits lasted a year, and we have new ones. So my contractors say we can get our new plans in 10 days, and I'm just seeking to postpone the 57. Like I truly want to bring everything to code, so it's not a headache for you, and it's for us to live in. We're currently moved out of the house, and we hope to get this resolved sooner so we can move back into our home as well. That's all I have.
Thank you very much. When did you acquire the property?
In 2005 or 2004,
Okay.
so a long ways back.
All right.
So
Thank you. So one option would be, again, to refer this to staff. Staff look at the plans, and I guess they satisfy themselves that following through on these plans would bring you into compliance where there'd be no need for a Section 57. So we could do it in 2 steps. We can do it into June to get an update from staff whether they, in light of the new plans, continue to recommend a placement of a Section 57, and then thereon in put it over to see if there is completion and implementation of the plans. Is that a fair way to go, Mr. Jones? Have you got some suggestions?
Your Worship, what we always seek to do is to achieve voluntary compliance.
Yep.
So if the property owner is interested in achieving that, certainly that's something that staff will work towards with the property owner. And we would be happy to report on our progress when we bring the next items forward to council.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to suggest that we have a similar motion that we had for Carnarvon.
So moved.
Okay.
Seconded.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. Any discussion on that? Thank you very much, sir. Discussion?
Just a quick,
Thank you.
I think
Councillor Murdoch.
it'd be interesting maybe perhaps in the June meeting to come back, because I think there's some difference between the applications that we see here. We had a couple here, Carnarvon and this one, where it appears the owners are rectifying the errors that are made in the past and are sort of moving that forward, or seeking more information, versus ones that have obviously gone through a process of sort of blatant noncompliance with bylaws. So I think there may be some just some thought or consideration given if there's a process of having this kick in a year or two or something along those lines. I'm not entirely clear on how onerous it is to take off a Section 57 title. You said mentioned it was at the cost of the owners.
Presumably, though, Mr. Jones, once the owner meets with our staff and staff satisfy themselves as there won't be at this time any need for a Section 57, your recommendation in June would be just to either cancel it or bring it back at a certain time. Would that be, or even just not even bring it back in front of us in June?
Your Worship, if the owners were working in good faith to have the appropriate permits and approvals in place, we wouldn't anticipate bringing those back to you. However, if in our opinion that's not happening, we will bring them back.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good. So it may not, if we don't see it on our June agenda, that's good news.
Correct.
Thank you. And for you, sir, I hope we don't see it. Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite, please.
Thank you. It just brings up again a question I think that I had wanted to ask with one of the other Section 57 notices, which is, again, around the builders who are doing this work and how a builder who could do this amount of work, because this is an extensive amount of work, I would say, can function or can think that they can work within Oak Bay without having a building permit. I wonder where we're going wrong as a municipality, that we are not giving that information or making that information available, or is it because we're not pursuing builders who work without having a permit? Because I think citizens should know that they need a permit for things, but sometimes they don't. They go to a builder and they ask a builder in good faith to do work on their house, and the builder goes ahead and does that without coming to the municipality to get a permit. I would say it's the builder's, it's on the builder to have to get the permit to do that work, correct?
Your Worship, regrettably, it is entirely on the property owner, because that is who ultimately is accountable.
So then again, though, if that is who's accountable, would it not behoove a builder to ensure that there is a building permit there before they would start work?
I would certainly think so.
So again, we either are doing a bad job letting builders know this, or we should have more sanction on builders who are working without a permit, in my humble opinion.
Thank you. That was a rhetorical device, not a question. Oh yes, Councillor Zelka, please, speaking to the motion to refer this to staff.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just wanted to underline that I appreciate Council supporting staff on making sure that that this gentle but firm compliance policy continues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. Item number 13, this is correspondence to do with items later on in the agenda.
Second.
For receipt. Moved and seconded. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Not opposed. New business and verbal reports. New business, anybody? I have a potential new business. Recently, at the end of April, received a letter, I think it was distributed, from Mayor Atwell, which sent a motion the council, his council had made, and they considered a report of the Governance Review Task Force Standing Committee, and which resolved as follows. This is their Governance Review Task Force Standing Committee. Quote, that Saanich remain receptive to any initiative for the creation of a regional police force, and request the mayor write to local mayors requesting participation in discussions on the potential of a regional police force. And then he goes on to say, please advise if you would be interested in participating in joint discussions. Some time ago, actually that motion, I'm not sure how long ago, but it was quite a while ago, that was done by Saanich, that Saanich committee. I did receive a call from the mayor, And I told him I was not in a position to voluntarily go to such a meeting without the directions of council. We've never had a discussion about at council level a regional police force. Whether or not we should have a regional police force, by the by, is council's decision, not the police board. And I made that very clear to Mayor Atwell. So it would have to come here. This letter, I take it as a result of that conversation I had with him, as I said quite some time ago. I don't know if he's reached out to any other mayor that is in a position to have to participate. What I can inform you, and this is something that the police board initiative has been underway for some time and is currently ramping up, is a police integration initiative that looks at having integrated units in the CRD. We recently, about a month ago, within the last month or so, received word that the Ministry of the Solicitor General has provided an amount of money for a consultant to meet with the mayors, all of the mayors. We've had one preliminary meeting, and the purpose of those meetings is to look for, is there a governance structure for integrated units that could be put in place to ensure that we have effective and efficient policing throughout the CRD. Currently, we have quite a number of integrated units, and you will recall that we have Oak Bay has a contract with Saanich, a very specific contract that Saanich comes in and does highly specialized police work, such as forensics and major crime investigation as well. We're all under the umbrella of a integrated homicide squad, which is called VIMQ, which not only looks at homicides but other extremely serious offenses. So I'm bringing this to your attention to see if there's any will on council to direct me to enter into these particular discussions, particularly in light of the fact that we're quite a ways down a cross-regional discussions on integration. And this would be essentially backing up from that and reversing and taking a different direction. So that's the new business. One possibility would be to have this referred to a committee of the whole, and that was one of the suggestions that staff had, that could be a discussion at the committee of the whole. So that's the new business I wish to draw to your attention. It would be a marked change in the way we deliver policing services. And we also have to keep in mind that we have a mandate from last referendum, a general mandate, whether or not it applies to police is a matter of a discussion and debate on amalgamation. So I leave that for you to think about at this point. And to see whether or not there's any interest in going down this route. If we don't have to make any decisions tonight, if a councillor feels strongly, we can bring a motion at the next council meeting. I think is probably the best way to do it, unless there's an appetite or a consensus tonight without too much reflection that in which direction we want to go. Personally, I think this is such a big step that we may want to just reflect on it. Councillor Murdoch, please.
I would just ask that you just circulate the letter around, and we can probably consider it a new business next time.
See, when I received it, I took it from the stamp. It had been circulated, but I guess it hadn't. Good. Okay, I can certainly do that. Okay, so that's one piece of new business. I'm going to go into the report from the CRD because it raises another item that council may want to undertake. You may have read, I think, in the papers that last meeting of the CRD dealt with the issue of the changes in the tax structure for local government politicians throughout Canada. Currently, the tax structure allows a certain portion of a salary to be paid without tax consequences. In other words, a tax-free allowance, which would aim at covering mileage and home office and any of those kind of sundry without a community having to pay for all of that. It's recognized that there is an associated cost with the job. At the CRD level, that was raised and debated initially at the Finance Committee and then last week at the board as a whole. And the direction the board has taken is that because this change in the tax structure will have a significant effect or impact, in effect, to reduce the salaries of councillors and mayors throughout Canada, or certainly through those communities that use this. And I think it's pretty well all throughout the CRD that the board's decision was to compensate, in other words, bring back the salary to a level as if these tax change hadn't occurred. So that's what the CRD has done. I know other councillors are considering it. One of the arguments I heard at the CRD for this was it's better that the old council, if I can refer to as that, take on this role, because it's going to be more difficult for a new council, because certainly it would look like new council will be giving themselves effectively a raise, although it's not really a raise, it's just bringing them up to the level of income that they had before the tax change. So that's, again, I leave that to you to mull over. The tax change comes in January 1st. Doesn't look like the federal government, despite representations from municipal associations, are going to change their tack on that, so that looks like it's going to be a change for the new council. It will not affect this council. So I leave you to contemplate that, and we certainly have a process that it can be brought back to council by notice of motion already. I think that was, there was one, let me just pull it up here. I have it on my iPhone. I apologize for not having it all up. There was a number of other items that I can report out on from the CRD board. Again, most of these were in the paper. There was a motion to suggest that municipalities take on robustly the Energy Step Code, and that was not approved by the board because it was felt that each municipality, in terms of their own priorities, their own capacity to change, they're essentially the building code, if I can call it that. So that's what the consensus was at the board. Yeah, those are the things I want to bring to your attention as your representative on the CRD. Now, other verbal reports, please. Verbal report, Councillor Kirby, please.
Thank you, Chair. I had several things to report. So I met with our new liaison to the District of Oak Bay from School District 61, Trustee Peg Orcherton. She was appointed as our, they've done a new liaison role, and so we met and had an excellent discussion about several topics. So I'll just give you a very quick, brief overview of some of the things we discussed and some information that was new to me, and hopefully won't be something that you already know. So I suggested that I think that Oak Bay would be interested in seeing the reopening of Richmond and Upland's schools to serve the elementary grades, as Willows, as we all know, is bursting at the seams, and at 680 kids is one of the largest in the largest elementary schools in the province. So we also don't want to see those portables being necessary forever too. So the district is currently looking at their boundaries, and they're also doing a review of French immersion. and how that might be distributed. But they're definitely considering all options. I think a heavier emphasis on the Richmond school, as it's a larger school, I think, but it's giving their tenants and leasees adequate notice. That's causing some issues, but I think everybody recognizes that their mandate is to provide space for students, and that's what those schools were built for, and that's their purpose. So. Although that might be a challenging process, that is definitely on the table. So with regard to active and safe routes to school, which is obviously something I brought up with her, she said that the possibility of boundary reviews is also part of this process, and that would make walking to school more of an option if the schools were reopened and the boundary reviews were made. And removal of the ability to transfer out of catchment as easily as it was done before. That's going to change how schools are deciding whether or not to accept students. So they may be more walkable or bikeable, which is awesome, which is part of the problem we were facing earlier. So in addition, the Bowker plan, the Operations Committee received had a presentation from the CRD Bowker Creek coordinator and representatives from the Bowker Creek, the Friends of Bowker Creek, and they adopted or endorsed the plan. Now it needs to go to the board, and the board has endorsed it, but they don't understand exactly what next steps will be, so they've asked staff to come back with a report as to just exactly what that means. Endorsing the report is one thing, but actually implementing any measures that would see protection of the creek in future on their lands, such as Richmond School, are to be seen. As far as the school crossing guard issue, that is ongoing. It's under review by their superintendent and the VC PAC, which is, I think, basically the regional PAC for Vancouver or South Island. That they're going to, in their May operations standing committee, which is tonight at 7 o'clock, same time. And so I'm going to hear back from her soon. I'll have an update at the next meeting. So we should hopefully have some resolution for our beloved crossing guards at Willows before their contract is up at the end of this year. There's also an issue of childcare, which we expected. We had hoped to work better agreements and use of space in the summer, because the rec center has been unable to use the space at Willows School in the summertime, and we'd hope to rectify that situation for future, and also for the future use of the portables. That could be another alternative as well for before and after school care. And then lastly, on that file, the mental health, they are working with me as far as plans for the community conversation that I'm organizing, which is another item. I'm just going to tell you that I'm aiming for June 18th to 22nd that week. I haven't chosen a date yet, exactly, just waiting to confirm with some speakers and make sure that we have a varied panel to provide accurate information to the public, and on particularly the issue of youth mental health and addictions. I'm saving probably September will be the date for another event on mental health regarding loneliness and dementia for seniors at the senior center. So, but there's some very exciting research taking place on those issues, and so I'm going to aim to have the greatest and latest information at that session in September. And then second last, I want to thank the Oak Bay Police Department, Mayor Jensen, and Councillor Croft for joining us on the bike train last week. I think there was about 60 kids from North Oak Bay and about 40 kids from South Oak Bay, and I think we won again, but not that it's a race.
Hang on, there was about 10 adults. And that's 2-to-1 ratio size, bike size.
Right,
So
right,
I think it's fair to say there was a tie.
All right. And I just was so disappointed that it decided to rain, like literally for that 2 hours. Like there was a week of sun and then 2 hours of rain right when the bike train happened. And then there's another 2 weeks of sun. But oh well, that just shows that kids can ride in, the rain and it doesn't stop them. And they had a blast and I had a blast. So that was a great, great time. Thanks so much, the Oakville Police Department, for leading us, and the lights and the little tweets and all that stuff. It was really fun. And lastly, I wanted to mention that everybody may be noticing that the public art is popping up all over the place and rolling out across the community. And there's some really nice new sculptures I'm very, very excited about. And the plaques should be coming. They're being printed right now and should be installed in the next few weeks in time for the June 14th, Thursday. Just make doubly sure before I make an error. But Thursday, June 14th at 2:45 p.m. There's the Arts Alive tour. So it's a bus that's donated to us by Destination, I'm going to say the wrong one. It's not Wilson's, it's somebody else. It's Wilson's new name? Okay, it's branded something else. I can't remember the brand. I'm sorry. But anyways, there's a beautiful bus, air-conditioned bus, and also the rec center bus, which is also a beautiful bus. Maybe less nice, and but lots of fun. And it's super fun because the artists are invited to talk about their sculptures. So you get immediately you don't have to try and wonder about it the entire season or the whole year. What does this sculpture mean and why did they do this? It's just the best way to learn about the sculptures. You really get a really great idea about why the artist came up with the design that they did to suit this year's theme, which is balancing act. So if you wander around and you start to see these things come up and you see the sculpture and think balancing act, you might wonder why a flower, like the great big flower outside of Pure Vanilla. And so if you're there, you'll get an explanation. And otherwise, there are explanations. If you use your phone, there's a QR code that'll be on the plaques, as well as that'll take you to the explanation on our website. And then there's also a voting button. You can use a QR code, so wander around all of them before you vote and use your QR code to vote, or use a paper vote as well. Those are still available this year. And
That's almost it.
Lastly, we did another pop-up session this weekend at the Nosh and the Oak Bay Nosh, which was fabulous. It smelled so good. It was very painful right at lunchtime. And there was lots of feedback. I think we had about 40 people stop in and give us put their stickers on the board. But if you haven't done it, please go to the website, and it's on our main page, oakbay.ca. There's a survey about how you want to be engaged by the district and what information you want to learn from us and how you want to get it and where you want to see it. So please do that.
Maybe you should expand on the smell was so painful. I think what you meant there was...
I'm on a diet, and so
yes,
it was really
right.
hard to be next to
the smell was lovely.
Bistro. Blighty's Bistro was there with these fish tacos, and there was like ribs, which I'm a vegetarian, so it wasn't tempting, but wow, it smelled really good.
The pain was resisting. But I can also assure people that in terms of the rollout of the new sculptures, there's no individual body part to share on display, such as the nose. We do have a whole face, but no individual bits and pieces of person.
Much to the relief of the committee this year.
Yeah. Anyway.
And the neighbors.
Okay, thank you very much for all of those. Councillor Nate?
Yeah, Councillor Kirby, thank you for just mentioning the pop-ups as part of the engagement task force. And I was just going to mention very briefly, quite right, we've been around the community. We've engaged over 300 people, and we're increasing the numbers online. People are still coming on. We have one of our committee members in the audience, and so they're popping up in front of the library, in front of the schools, on the parks, at the rec centers, in the village area. So if you see the pop-up, or you know people know other people, please come by, have a say, tell us what you think. And if you can't do that or know other people, veer them towards the online survey, which takes about 3 or 4 minutes to fill out. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? No. Okay. Councillor Croft.
Sorry. I'll try to be more brief than Councillor Kirby, but I did want to say that
we know you had a lot of things to say.
Yeah. And I just wanted to say that on behalf of the district, I attended the Tourism Victoria AGM on April 27th. And I just wanted to go over some of the highlights. It was a very successful year for Tourism Victoria. Condé Nast named Victoria #2 on its Reader's Choice list of best small cities outside the U.S. In January 2017, the Victoria Conference Centre and Tourism Victoria became one team, and then this year they've added sports tourism. We now have a complete umbrella of opportunities for people to work and enjoy our community for various reasons. In 2017, there were 22,916 room nights booked through the Victoria Conference Centre compared to 12,160 in 2016, an 88.7% increase. VCC revenue increased from $1,300,000. That's a 17% increase over 2016. A combination of occupancy rate was actually down about 0.5% to about 73.4, but the average room rate went up by $9 to $169. The MRDT tax, that's the destination tax that is collected by the hotels, increased 76.7% to $3 million to $5 million in 2017. This was primarily due to an increase of 2 to 2.8% in the city of Victoria alone. There was also a transfer of $500,000 that used to be held back by the city to run the conference center that is now coming to the Tourism Victoria. There are two things that they're still working on, and that is the Belleville Terminal and short-term vacation rental rules and regulations. I did bring 4 copies of the annual report if anybody from council would like one, or staff to put in the file. I also attended the Oak Bay Business Improvement Association AGM on Tuesday, May 8th with Councillor Braithwaite. Councillor Braithwaite had to leave because she had another event, so she thanked them in the very beginning for the BIA support of the Yes Awards. Ms. Leary, the marketing coordinator, reviewed the successful events for the year: Spring Nosh, Village Night Markets, Halloween, Christmas Festival, banners, Yes Award sponsorship, and the Tell Us Future Home display, which we had here last year, which was attended by quite a few people. The directors for 2018 are Martin Cowden, Jeff Beattie, Tony Tucker, Scott Piercy, and Liz Smith, who will stay on as a member at large to help with the night markets. The new business that was discussed was continuing concern about parking in the village, greater use of social media for promotions, and they're looking at increased night market fees for 2019. Not only was I asked to take minutes, because I was the only person there that wasn't a director, I also thank the BIA on behalf of the Mayor and Council for the association's contribution to the vibrancy of the village. That's my report.
Thank you very much, Councillor Croft. Anybody else? Councillor Murdoch? Oh, and then we'll go to you, Councillor Silka. Thank you.
Thank you. And yeah, I would reiterate, I think there was a lot of excitement at the BIA's AGM on the Spring Nosh. That was seen as a real highlight. I would just add a couple of things on heritage. There's the next talk. The Heritage Talk is scheduled for September 19th, so it's their 50th talk in that series that they've had over the years. So in celebration, someone's talking from the 1850s to the 1950s to talk about those years. I also just want to acknowledge that on May 1st, there was the Hallmark Awards were held in Victoria, and Oak Bay had its highest amount of recognition in our history. There was 5 homes designated last year that were all recognized this year, as well as 2 awards of merits for considerable and significant heritage restorations, and 3 communications awards for a book and 2 websites on Oak Bay. So it was very well attended. Appreciated the mayor coming and speaking, and a great turnout from Oak Bay, both from the heritage community as well as just the broader community and support. So I think Oak Bay made up about half the room that night or more. So it was a very, very well received event. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Zalka, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to give a shout out to the 5th Gary Oak Cubs and Scouts who came first at the spring jamboree up at Camp Barnard on the weekend of 4th and 5th. They had their annual spring wolf howl with a dinosaur theme, and our 5th Gary Oak group did everyone proud. Thank you.
You said 5th karaoke. Yes. Okay. Just on that, I attended maybe about 10 days ago a part of their Chief Scouter Award project, and it was absolutely a delightful project. What it did is it brought the Scouters, all of the troop, over to Marion Gardens, and they had conversations and dialogues with the residents there. And the things that those young people learned from the seniors was absolutely delightful. I listened in on a few of them, and there was one woman talking to, and I think there was 4 scouts, turned out all to be girls. They were probably about 12 to 14 years. And this woman had lived in off the land, so to speak. And the jaws of these girls just dropped. Where were the stores? There were no stores. We hunted, we fished, we made our own clothing, we farmed, and we lived by ourselves. And those stories passing from generation to generation are just priceless. And so they're a very active scout troop, and they're certainly to be credited for their connection to the community. So thanks for drawing up, and they no doubt justly won those those things. So we're now going to move on to resolutions number 15, which has to do with 1248 Hewlett Place. Is either the owner or applicant or representative here, and which of them are you?
I'm a representative of the applicant.
Thank you very much. We'll just see if there's any questions. You don't have to come to the microphone yet. This is a matter that has been vetted at the Committee of the Whole. Ms. Jensen, just tell us in a couple of lines what this is about, please.
You are correct, Your Worship. This application was considered by the Committee of the Whole at their April 16th meeting. The homeowners would like to construct an addition to the rear of the home. This is along Hewlett Place. The addition itself meets the requirements of the zone, but it does require 2 variances. One to occupiable height, so that the floor of the addition will match with the existing floor level. The other for building height. The proposed addition has a slightly different slanted roof, and so it requires that variance.
Thank you very much. Now, what I'm going to suggest is we put the motion on the floor, and then I will ask if any members of the
Move
public...
the staff recommendation. Second.
Moved, seconded. Are there any members of the public who wish to address us on this issue? Seeing none coming forward, I'm going to ask, are there any council members who wish to question the representative of the applicant? No? Or staff? No? Okay. Discussions on the motion. As I said, it's been vetted and then sent out for notice, so it has been with us for a while. No discussion? All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. We next go to resolutions where there has been notice. The first one is the employer health benefit tax. The second one is related, somewhat related, and it's got the word tax in it. What I did just prior to coming in, I circulated some 5 pages of documents just about what other organizations that we either belong to or are part of, where they are on both of these issues. And you may recall, although I don't think all of you went to AVICC, there was a motion on this at AVICC, just to refresh your memory at page 5. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Councillor Murdoch. First, put it on the floor We'll have it seconded, and then I'll ask you to be the first speaker on it. Thank you.
Would you like me to read it out or just as it's in here?
I just give us the essence of it. It's in essence to direct a letter.
Draft a letter to the
why
Premier.
don't you read out the resolution, not the warehouses?
No, I won't read the whereases. Therefore be it resolved that the mayor be directed to draft a letter to Premier Horgan, Minister of Finance Carol James, and MLA Andrew Weaver, requesting that further consultation with UBCM be completed prior to implementation of the employer health tax, that MSP and employer health tax costs not be double charged in 2019, and that consideration be made in the implementation of the new tax to reduce the impact of healthcare costs on property taxes and the funding of arts and recreation services.
Second.
Moved and seconded. So, do you want to speak to the motion to begin with, and Councillor Murdoch? And
Yeah, and thank you very much, Chair. The primary concern on this one really is the implementation timeline, specifically the doubling up where they're charging MSP, and which we pay 80% in 2019, as well as 2.9% employer tax in 2019. So we're paying twice, and the impact of that on Oak Bay is quite significant, as it is identified, as you pointed out in many reports, to other bodies as well. This isn't arguing that the tax should be removed. That's an idea already dismissed out of hand by the Minister of Finance, but really just to, I think, trying to express some reasonable concerns about those two factors, just so that they may consider them a little bit more thoroughly in terms of understanding the impacts. And I understand as well already that the Minister is considering some tools to perhaps mitigate the impact of this on some of the nonprofits, recognizing that this is going to fall very heavily on those aspects. But I think this would add some additional weight to that call. I think this is there are also motions coming to UBCM on this factor. I guess my point here is I considered altering this to include a motion to UBCM, but the reality is that as a tax is being implemented in 2019, by the time it gets to UBCM, if it passes, the response time available to make changes at that point are very slim. So really this is just a chance for add our voice to the many voices that have been written, just to identify the concerns that we have, perhaps make some small suggestions in terms of how that might be mitigated, and to see some of those changes implemented before the tax is implemented.
thank you. And just to refresh everyone's memory, the AVICC motion, which passed, and it had actually been brought by the AVICC executive to the floor, was therefore be it resolved that AVICC, which is, for those of you who don't know that acronym, Association of Vancouver Island Coastal Communities, which essentially are all the mayors and councillors on the island and on the north of the Sunshine Coast. AVICC and the Union of British Columbia Municipalities request that the province meet with UBCM to discuss the proposed tax, the implications of the tax, and to request a delay in its implementation until UBCM has then had an opportunity to provide feedback to the province. And as you, the thing I circulated, I received late Friday from UBCM essentially was that there's some, there's a number of tax resolutions going to UBCM in September, and there's some the meetings with the that has been shared with the Minister of Finance and the Minister of Municipal Affairs, and there's going to be at least one meeting coming up in July. I don't know if you can add any other light to this, Councillor Braithwaite. You are a representative on the AVICC executive, but you weren't at the time that they fashioned this and brought it to the floor.
No, and our first meeting is not until June, so.
So if they, okay. Okay. All right. Anyone else wish to discuss? Yes, Councillor Zelko, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. And thank you, Councillor Murdoch, for bringing the motion forward. We need to have further discussions over the modifications to the various tax structures at the local, provincial, and even at the federal level. I see what you're getting at, and I have no issue with, in general, delaying an implementation or suggesting a delay so that further study can happen, say, at the UBCM level. I do take exception with the item about the property taxes are the least progressive of tax models. And when I look up things like progressive taxes, basically a progressive tax is essentially one where, how do I say this? A higher income earner pays a higher percentage of taxes and more taxes than does a lower income earner. That's what a progressive tax is. Whereas the tax that we currently have is more of a flat tax, which is certainly not considered proportional, where everyone essentially, sort of like a head tax, everyone basically pays the same. That is not considered a progressive tax. So I think, I'm glad you used the word progressive to say that this at least is a progressive tax compared to what was there before. I do take exception to say that it's the least progressive. I will be supporting this, but in general, I'm actually in favor of this tax. Thank you.
Just on that point, that's part of the whereases, if I'm not mistaken. I'm just can't quite put my, and so any letter will not include all those whereases. Essentially, it'll just be a letter from me to go to this. And I would suggest that we also make reference in any letter to where our association, all of the councillors and mayors, and I don't know if this was unanimous, but certainly there's no indication that it was a strongly split. But I think it's important also to bring to the Premier's attention, if it hasn't already been done so, that we are part of AVICC, and as part of AVICC, we support their thrust. Because one thing we want to avoid is to be seen to be kind of going either against or on a different track from AVICC, and that would be my only concern, that we don't be seen to be doing that. So I think there should be something in there too, if you would agree that, reference to, it's not just us, it's all of the island communities and Powell River and the others. So, okay.
If I may, there's nothing in the motion that would preclude that.
No,
We're leaving it to the
that's what I'm
discretion of the
thinking.
wording to you.
Yep. And I can't remember when we had that. That was the first weekend in April, I think we did this. So probably a letter is already gone, but yep. Other discussion, Councillor Kirby, then Councillor Ney, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to express my my opinion on this. I don't. I see that there is a benefit to the community in not having to pay MSP, the employees not having to pay MSP, and which means about an $800 savings annually for families. And if this were to be an increase on their property tax, which it will as we pay more, I don't see the correlation to it won't be the same increase. There's definitely no way that they're going to be paying $800 a year in property tax. It's a much smaller amount. I'd say probably less than $50 annually for this increase for us to cover that across the community. And so I think this is a benefit to families across our community, and really is a benefit to BC. We were the only province in the country that had MSP. As a federal employee, I can, in my day job, I can vet for that it was an added complication for my healthcare service delivery for my family. Having to go through MSP made things much more difficult. And I think it's just it's an added burden that families in BC don't need. So I think this is a good thing, and it will not impact us individually in the negative as much as it does the positive.
Thank you very much. Councillor Ney.
Yeah, I'm just going to say a few words about my view on this. Thank you, Councillor Murdoch, for bringing this forward. And I do appreciate there's been lots of effort at our associations, AVSC, UBCM, to address this issue. The issue I had, I'm fully supportive of the government's effort to make healthcare costs more affordable and fair for all families in BC. So that I don't take task with that. But I am a little confused about how it is that they came upon this particular taxation measure. And I had a chance to review the MSP Task Force interim report. And they were very clear in that report. They submitted it back to the government on March 31st. And they emphasized in that report how important it was, given the complexity of this kind of a tax and the positive and negative any one measure, that the government consider a combination of measures in order to mitigate the negative impacts of the tax. And so they spoke to payroll, income tax, and other measures like looking at taxes on unhealthy products that are the basis of unhealthy health problems. And they had a number of other suggestions, and also that they were going to expand in their final report, which the government currently has, which hasn't yet been released. So, this notion of how we can mitigate the negative impacts, there are other measures that they have in their reports that can be considered. So I think the direction that we're going, where we're asking the government to look at ways where they can mitigate perhaps some of these unintended consequences of the measure, is a good thing to be doing right now.
Thank you very much. Councillor Braithwaite, please.
Thank you. I agree, Councillor Ney, that it's great that the government's looking at ways to become more affordable and fair. I think where I look at this as well is if I'm a small business owner, I'm almost getting triply affected by this, because I have to do something for my employees. I then have to pay to the municipality to cover the municipalities' costs, and then also provincially. So to me, I really think they need to take a step back and take a good look at it, because they're not, I don't think, making it more affordable and fair. I think that they're actually adding to the burden. So I'm very happy to support this resolution going forward, or this motion going forward.
Thank you. There's no question that we have a very good healthcare system, and it often arises how we're going to pay for it. And that's a very complex formula. And this is a way that the provincial government has chosen. However, unfortunately, as sometimes has occurred in the past, that ends up the burden falling more directly on the shoulders of local governments. And this is another example of what's often called downloading. But we do have to find ways to pay for our health system, no question about that. This is probably not the best way to do it. We know that we've over the years, we've had lots of downloading, and it's continuing. When the federal government walked away from the harbors and said, here, local governments, you look after them. The province bringing in legislation that's required us to spend over $20 million in the uplands on the sewers. And just coming over the horizon is likely cannabis, which is going to, the legalization is going to burden us by certain costs. So we really should not be the ones at the end of the line always picking up the cost. So I would certainly like to see there's some amelioration of the burden at this point. And I'm certainly prepared to send this letter and include the position of the AVICC, and no doubt, I think by July, I think the resolutions for our UBCM will be coming out, and we won't know whether or not they're passed until later, of course, but it will give some indication of what other communities feel. So, ready for the question? You're not ready for the question?
I just wanted to add one final comment, just that I think this shift is meant to be moving the shift of the taxes is meant to be moving the burden from the have-nots, which are the employees, the working class people of BC, or those of us, not those of us, but those that are the working poor, to those that own a corporation that has this large of a tax. my brain is not working, but you have to have a certain size of municipality in order to, or sorry, size of payroll in order to pay this tax. So I think it's meant to be shifting it to corporations. The unintended consequences that it impacts homeowners, but as we all know that it's the homeowners in this province that are also a lot wealthier than those that are not and are unable to access the security of the real estate market. So I do feel like this is a fair distribution of tax, and so I can't support the motion.
Yeah, certainly reducing the MSP is a better way to to deal with families and have-nots. Problem I see though is, and it's pointed out here, and is that we collect our monies through a relatively regressive tax system, which doesn't reflect necessarily the income of the payer. We're one of the few first world countries that require local governments to just, or mostly, not just, but mostly focus on these regressive taxation measures. And UBCM has, I think about 3, 4, maybe 5 years ago now, came forward with a whole bunch of suggestions as to a more progressive tax system for local governments, which was just rejected out of hand. In fact, there was not even a discussion about it. And many countries, Western world countries, have moved and allowed local governments to have progressive taxing systems. So some American jurisdictions, for instance, allow municipalities to put on sales tax or consumption tax. That's the trouble I have with kind of downloading, because it ends up on being paid through a regressive tax system. So, but we'll have to live with it. Okay, we ready for the question?
I just would like to point out, if I may, through Chair, the motion does not call for this not to happen. The motion calls, in fact, the first whereas says we recognize the value of this. The question is really, is this doubling up of the 1 year and the impact onto some of the arts and culture, have they been considered? And is that possible to ameliorate those particular impacts? So I don't think it should be not read as don't do this. This should be read as please consider your thoughts on this a little bit and talk to UBCM before it goes forward. So that is the motion, not don't do it.
And the same thing with AVICC as an association doesn't necessarily, they didn't say don't do it. They just said, delay until we've had an opportunity to have a further dialogue. Okay, all in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Okay, so sorry, Councillor Kirby opposed. You had said that. You were waved a little late. Now, the speculation, sorry about that. The speculation tax is up next, and those are pages 1 through 4 in that little documents. And I think there seems to be have been more work done, not only at the regional level. Looks like there's going to be work at the AVICC level, and UBCM is planning to address that too. And I've included in that little package, the CRD has already, the first page talks about UBCM will be considering these motions. I think I mentioned that before, coming forward with some motions in July, resolutions. The CRD's already sent one in for consideration. That's at page 2, and the actual motion at the CRD was at page 3. And then you will see at page 4 what happened to the speculation tax motion at our association. And I think Councillor Braithwaite will be having that discussion with the executive, because essentially AVICC appeared, at least on the face of it, to be split on this somewhat. There was people at both microphones, and finally we said, okay, let's defer it. It was very specific to do with district and Nanaimo, but others were wanting to expand it, et cetera. So I think it's something that we want to keep in mind going forward as to how whatever we do tonight fits in with the intention of our AVICC and UBCM, which is not clear at this point. Okay, Councillor Murdoch, please, if you would read out the be it resolved.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Therefore, be it resolved that the Mayor be directed to draft a letter to Premier John Horgan, Minister of Finance Carol James, Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing Selena Robinson, and Oak Bay Gordon Head MLA Andrew Weaver requesting that implementation of the speculation tax be suspended until the following steps are undertaken. That UBCM be consulted as part of the policy development, and that the definition and measure of vacant homes be clearly defined, and that more consideration be given to exclude Canadians from this tax, and that specific goals are outlined prior to implementation of a tax to measure the effectiveness, and that consideration be given to collecting the tax at the time of property transfer, and that homes purchased for the purpose of transitioning into a community be excluded from the tax, and that if a more thorough review of the tax and surrounding policies are not forthcoming, that Oak Bay be excluded from the speculation tax until a more consultative and thorough policy is developed.
Okay,
Second.
take that to be a motion. I'd second. All righty.
Me again?
Yeah, you go ahead, please.
Thank you. So I included a lot of whereases in this so people could have a good read of it. And I tried to include a number of line items in the motion because sometimes it's hard just to formulate words at this table that we can agree on. Sometimes it's easier if people feel strongly against one or two of these that we could strike them out. I think that's a faster process. Just recognizing that this is not our core aspect of our municipality. It is the province's domain, but I think it's an important one for many of the residents of the community. When Mr. Stinson spoke earlier, he identified correctly that these are technical considerations made to the proposed speculation tax. They are not specifically saying the speculation tax is bad. In fact, I would argue that in fact it says in the whereas is the intent of this is good. So really this has a number of possible actions. There are issues forthcoming on this. I think it was recognized immediately when someone mentioned a cabin tax. Some changes were made so that the cabins were excluded, but Whistler was left included. The Highlands and Langford were moved out, but other aspects of the CRD were included. There isn't a very clear guidance here in terms of what the goals are and how they're going to accomplish it. The issue I have here primarily is that despite the best intentions of the speculation tax as it's put forward, it's not really addressing speculators, as far as I can tell, very effectively. It's going to it sort of presumes everybody not living in their house or that it doesn't come forward with that is automatically someone who is a speculator. And I don't think that's the truth. I think that the truth is that there's a number of citizens that have multiple scenarios that might catch them in this web. And that frankly, for people who are truly speculators and are willing to sort of skirt the law, that they can fairly easily circumvent it by coming up with leases for vacant properties. And so I've just asked Council to look at the options, really just to ask the province to craft legislation that will accomplish the intent of the speculation tax and not sort of move forward quickly on this. Take the time to speak to UBCM, take this time to actually look at this in a way that makes sure that you get input from the experts from the ground level, like the municipalities that actually have to deal with these issues. It is a very punitive tax. It is, in the order of 2 to 3 to 4 times higher than property tax is. So if a house is sitting vacant, and I'll give it a quick example to finish this off, unclear, of course, at this point as to how it's going to be proven. But if a couple is moving into a house and they leave it empty while they renovate it, is that going to be caught within this tax because it's a vacant home? That tax is a $20,000 add-on to the cost in Oak Bay, just the 1 year. It's not an insignificant amount of money, and make it impossible for people to actually get into the market or to make these changes. So I will leave it at that, and I think that probably the best course of action here is to go through this. I mean, if you feel that this is overall negative, then certainly speak that, but if not, perhaps we can talk to the individual line items and get through this reasonably quickly.
Okay, thank you very much. I didn't get any sense of in my conversation and then email exchange with UBCM on Friday, which was rather rushed, as to where they were at in terms of had they been consulted, what were the planned consultations, and I take it from what you said earlier, Councillor Braithwaite, you don't have any kind of inside information about what AVICC is doing. So for instance, I think I'm not sure we have enough information that UBCM hasn't been consulted. I don't know if you've had if you've spoken to the president or whatever in terms of this, because I typically, sometimes the consultations are minimal, but it looks like certainly coming up in July, the intention is the executive is to meet with at least one cabinet minister, and that might be part of that. And I don't know if the actual legislation has been drafted. Do you know, Mr. Jones? Have you seen any legislation?
No, Your Worship.
Because that's a number two. There may well be, until we see the legislation, we won't know how defined or lack of definition there is in there. So the issue of excluding Canadians from the tax, I guess, really depends on what the philosophy of the tax really is. If the tax is to ensure, because I don't think it's a speculation tax personally. I think it's an occupancy tax or a vacancy tax, really. And if there's a house that's vacant, does it matter who owns it, whether or not they be Canadians versus foreigners? It's a vacant home that should be contributing to the economy with people living in them. I'd certainly, having discussed this with our MLA, the feeling that he had certainly was that individual municipalities should be allowed to decide themselves. So I think this being allowed to opt in or opt out, I think is certainly supportable. So I don't know if we should get this specific. In other words, until at least we know where AVICC is heading, we'll know that in June, and perhaps we might have a better sense of where UBCM is headed. We should know that. The one part of the informational base that I don't have, and maybe it's possible to get, is there has been a vacancy tax in Vancouver for some period of time. What effect has that had? And did the government consider that? Is there evidence? Is this an evidence-based piece of proposed legislation? And if it had no effect, then I could see why are we spreading this throughout British Columbia. So it's that part of the puzzle is out there. On the other hand, if there's evidence that it has a big effect and there's a lot less vacant homes, or it's reduced, for instance, I think someone said it may have the effect of reducing Airbnbs, that's a good side effect. But to what end? So in other words, I'm not sure we have enough information to take specific positions as is here, but certainly to ask them to consult with us and to have that further discussion, I think is very laudable. And so I don't know if it's worth waiting to see in June and we get a report back from Executive Director on AVICC and then waiting until July to find that out. Because I think you can be sure that this letter is not going to have any impact until the government sees what AVICC, or for that matter, UBCM position they've taken. And even then, UBCM is often ignored with their position. So that's all by way of saying I think there's some thrusts in here that are very positive. But really, we want to try to be as effective as possible. And to be effective, is it more effective to work through AVICC and UBCM than to just kind of go down the road on our own? And will we be listened to any more than AVICC or UBCM? So that's something that I think is worthy of some discussion. Councillor Ney?
So from what I've understood about the speculation tax, I agree in principle what I understood their goals to be, and that was to help turn the vacant and underutilized homes into properties where people can live in them. And they were also trying to target speculators. But the issue I have, I'm going to speak to the motion in a sec, but the issue I have generally, this one kind of confuses me because I can understand why it would have been targeted for Metro Vancouver, perhaps downtown Victoria as well. but for Oak Bay, I'm not clear. I'm fully supportive of ensuring that we do not have an onslaught of empty homes in our community. That's truly a problem for breaking up our community. But I don't have the data here. I haven't seen it come across the council table. Maybe one of the other councillors or somebody has, about the number of vacant, fully vacant homes we have. Yeah,
I
do
think
you have that?
Councillor Croft has done a little bit of work on that, but I don't know if you have the
Well,
definitive definition.
Well, no, I've been working on it. In fact, I've actually written Statistics Canada to try and come up with an idea where they got the numbers from Oak Bay, because they do report that there are something in the neighborhood of 357 dwellings that are vacant, but that's based upon 385 new homes being built between 2011 and 2016. And we know that in our community there were not 385 new homes built during that period. There were homes that were rebuilt on lots. And the only thing that I could find that was new actually over that period was, of course, the Clive and the redevelopment of the Oak Bay Beach Hotel. And even if you double count the Oak Bay Beach Hotel, because it took a change in the tax roll, the way the BC assessment assessed it, that's 240 units that you could say were new units out of that whole amount. But I think what they've done is they've applied a percentage per community based upon a survey of other communities, because that's what it looks like to me, is that they got a number from Vancouver of 8% vacancy, and they applied it to other communities. And so I've written them. The other thing is that, to your point of how much money was raised through the 15% vacancy tax in Vancouver, I think that was reported by the mayor of Vancouver that approximately $30 million was raised by that tax in their area, and they had compliance of about 90% or something in that range, and they're running down the people that didn't comply, that they knew that were, because it was, my house is vacant, then they paid the tax. They declared it as a vacant property.
But in Vancouver, is it not fair to say that the city of Vancouver kept the money? And in this,
absolutely. That was money for the city of Vancouver, which they're going to use to create non-market housing. And we should use terms like market housing and non-market housing. There's terms of affordable or what have you. You know, there's two kinds of housing: market, that goes to the market to be sold, and there's the other kind that has some form of assistance to it to make it affordable for those that need help.
And because the difference here is that local municipalities don't get any of the money. I understand there may be some discussions ongoing that might make it more Vancouver-like. I don't know. So, in any event, so was it Councillor Zelka? Did I see you?
Well,
yeah,
I didn't quite finish.
You want to?
No, I was trying.
You weren't
to
finished before?
No.
Oh, we just
But
threw over the question to Councillor
now I have
Croft.
the
My
information.
apologies.
No, that's fine.
Okay, carry on.
So now I have the information that's helpful, Councillor Croft. I appreciate that. So what I'm left to understand from what you've said is we really don't know if what you're reporting out is accurate and not to be refuted by the government. So then what we have is we're not clear if we have an issue with vacant houses in our particular community. So then what we're doing is looking for a solution for a problem we don't actually have here. So if that's the case, then getting into the weeds here about the details of what a speculation tax should include doesn't really, for me, make sense at this point. But for me, what I like to do is see what the UBCM report, because they've got some experts on there who are going to feed us some good information and analysis. I really like to see what that has to say. And if it is the case that we don't have vacant homes, I would be looking for a motion that we make a case that we be given the option to opt out ourselves. Like we're not going to have this imposed on our community for a reason, because we haven't got the same kind of problem that some of the larger metro areas do.
Let me ask Ms. Jensen, is there any information that we have in our data banks anywhere where it could give us a handle on vacancy rates? I don't think we survey people, but is there?
No, we don't have anything readily available. We are working towards more and more electronic data in our system. So tracking things like the number of demolitions versus number of building permits, new homes and so on. But in terms of vacancy, nothing readily available.
What are the chances, Councillor Croft, of us getting real data from StatsCan? Because you'd mentioned that they have it as there was 385 houses built between 2011, 2016. Well, we also, at the same time, they said there was only 87 new people that arrived on our shores at that time. So that means that there's, you know, there's a complete disconnect in my mind statistically between those two numbers. What are the chances of StatsCan coming up with any reliable information for us to base? Because I agree with you know, Councillor Ney that I think a more credible argument for us to say is, if we can prove it, there's no problem here. Leave us out of this, right? We have like 10 homes, and those 10 homes are, here are the circumstances, or whatever. Go ahead.
And we have two of them. The two houses on Hampshire and Monterey. So, you know, we're going to charge ourselves a vacancy tax. I think the other thing that's really interesting too is that actually the Victoria Real Estate Board does track the number of buyers as reported by the realtors of their origin. 90% of the buyers in Victoria come from BC. There's another 8% that come from the rest of Canada, and only 2% come from offshore, from other countries. So we're looking at a 2% of all of the properties that are sold in this area that may be bought by speculators, but they may be bought for long-term planning too.
Are those figures for Greater Victoria, or are they specific to Oak Bay?
Those are for Greater Victoria.
Do they parse them down to what Oak Bay looks like?
Yeah, the Real Estate Board could provide a breakdown for Oak Bay, absolutely.
That might be of importance for us. I guess going forward, when you're making a pitch to provincial government who typically doesn't listen, the stronger your factual basis for your own community, the better. You were waving at me, Councillor Kirby, so you're next then.
Thank you. I have spoken with a representative from Generation Squeeze. I'm not sure if you're aware of that group, but if you are, then you will know that they have been working on the issue of housing, particularly, and other issues like childcare, that where the younger generation, those under 40, are more heavily burdened and receive less of the tax, a share of tax services through their tax. More services are aimed at an older demographic. And so that's where they started out. But now they're really becoming the experts on this housing crisis. And it is truly an affordability crisis. And I think we in Oak Bay tend to be slightly removed from that and forget because many of us are homeowners and forget just how challenging it is for people out there to find homes in the first place. This is anecdotal, but I know of people that have now built resumes of what an amazing renter they are, just so that when they arrive at the open house for, with 60 other people, that to compete for a very modest apartment, that they can somehow be remembered or be seen as above the crust, and that seems just very unfair that people are having to do that kind of thing. So we know that the rental availability is at continues to be at less than 1% in this region, and that this tax aims to make sure that all houses in Oak Bay are filled with people, like that they are not sitting empty. That is just a tragedy when people can find no place to live, that there are places sitting empty. And this tax allows, Canadians that are moving eventually to the community, that are retiring here, as your motion outlines, to rent those homes out. There's no reason they can't be rented out while they're absent. And so I see the goal of housing more people, because housing, that's what it's for. Homes are for housing, for shelter, not for a tax shelter, not for some kind of investment that, and that's what, when they describe it as a speculation tax, you can call it a vacancy tax, but it's also speculation, because we can assume that in Oak Bay in the last 2 years, my property tax has gone up, or my property value has gone up 10% each year. That's an amazing investment. I mean, I had no idea what I was doing when I bought my little cottage in Oak Bay, that it was going to be the value that it is now, and it's insane. And I think we forget that. We've lost sight, maybe, that of the challenge people are facing to be housed in this region. When you mentioned earlier that that there's only 2% of foreign buyers, as in that this is an offshore speculation issue. When I spoke with the representative from Gen Squeeze about this, they explained that even that 2%, if they are paying a higher premium, if they're paying a higher price, which they generally do because they're not here to negotiate and buy a house sight unseen and pay the asking price or whatever it is, whatever it takes to buy the house, they rise the prices of raise the value for local residents. So now everything goes up just a little bit more, even with just 2%. And we know specifically in Oak Bay, they don't provide, BC Assessment doesn't provide the data about Oak Bay specifically, because it's between 2 and 4 home sales a month, and they won't say specifically, because that would be less than 4 could reveal the identity of the individuals. So for privacy's sake, they won't say exactly the number, but we can guess it's between 2 and 4%. That's last year's data that I received from Generation Squeeze. So we know it happens in Oak Bay. It's an existing issue, and anecdotally again, a friend of mine lives in North Oak Bay, has 3 empty homes around her. That impacts your community, your sense of community, your sense of neighborliness. I know on another street closer to me, there are also 3 homes that are vacant that have been purchased by a foreign buyer. The word on the street, again, anecdotal, but this is happening in our community. And to pretend otherwise is burying our heads in the sand. And we need to be a part of the solution for affordability in this region. This is truly a housing crisis. And if we don't do our part, I mean, we aren't building affordable housing. We aren't increasing density. We aren't making the changes to make homes for people more available at the rate that we should be. And if we reject this tax, I think we're also saying to the rest of the region and the rest of the province that, no, Oak Bay doesn't have this problem and we don't care. And I think we do. I think we all care about the 30% of our community that rents, and those people that are still living at home because they can't move out. I was able at 18 to move out because it was a different environment. There was a totally different environment. And it was affordable for me to move out. And there was availability. I didn't have to put together a resume as an 18-year-old and try and come across as, very responsible and legitimate, and I'm going to be a quiet and saintly individual. I didn't have to do that because there wasn't that kind of challenge. That is so unfair. That kids can't move out. And it's kind of, I think it's changing our family dynamics. I think it's impacting the community in a different way. It makes sure that all of your income as a student or as your all of your disposable income, if you have any, as a young person, goes to housing rather than to spending it at coffee shops or going out and enjoying your life out like I did. And that seems very unfair. I don't think that's a burden I want to pass on to my kids or the generation that comes after me. So it's already unfair that millennials have to face this massive down payment that is far out of line from their incomes. I don't know if anybody's seen the research, but Gen Squeeze also provides that the difference between incomes, family income levels in 1974 to now have not improved, and that the housing costs have gone up dramatically. So it takes 27 years, I think, now to save for a down payment. That's unreasonable. So for us to send any kind of message other than that we absolutely support this speculation tax in its effort to reduce the number of vacant homes in our community and to pass the burden onto those that have, not those that don't have anything. I think that's fair. I think it's a fair game. If you've got a second home in Oak Bay, where the average home value is $1.3 million, and that's your second home, you're doing very well. And this tax might disincentivize you from leaving it empty. So it might encourage you to rent it out and make it available to a student or a young family that needs a house and needs a home. And there are tons. If anybody needs any real-time evidence, you can just go on to Oak Bay Local and see the number of requests that come up daily. I'm referencing a Facebook group that's Oak Bay Local, but they come up daily asking for, please help, we're trying to move into the region, or we're trying to stay in Oak Bay because our kids go to the schools here and we've been renting a home and now it's up for sale, but we have no place to go. So those kids are going to be moved out because of catchment rules. They're going to have to lose their home and move elsewhere because there's no availability. We have to do our part here.
Thank you very much. Councillor Zelko, I think you were going to speak next. Thank you, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. On the balance of ideas, I will not be supporting this motion. In general, I have to say I support the speculation tax for a number of reasons, and I'd like to touch on a few of them. I wanted to quote, first of all, from a letter that's in our package in the correspondence, basically making reference to, while sympathizing with Canadians who wish to spend all or part of their retirement in BC's milder climate, this letter goes on to say that there are negative impacts of external forces. This person now has large vacant houses next to this person, and they know of several vacant houses within a close radius. They were purchased by offshore owners, according to this person, who have no intent of living in Oak Bay. I was intrigued because a reference is made to the OCP and the impact of empty houses on our community. When I go to the OCP and I look up the word empty, what I find in projections and trends is a quote. The shift in our demographics can lead to some unsettling consequences. Already many houses near the water sit empty as second homes. This is our official community plan. As one Beach Drive resident stated, I am alone in my house. All the neighboring houses belong to people from elsewhere. And that's my own personal evidence in terms of the houses near me. There are a number of empty houses near me as well. I am very concerned at the changes to our community, and I want to be part of the solution, certainly not part of a problem where I feel I have a chance to make a difference and at least say something. I have no problems believing the last census when Statistic Canada suggested there are over 300 empty houses in Oak Bay, 5% of our housing stock. If you want some numbers, as inaccurate as they may be, it's some numbers that from my evidence and from what I'm reading, I have no problems believing these numbers. And my worry is that they're going to get worse. So I have to agree with the mayor. The title of this tax probably should have been renamed a vacant homes tax as opposed to a speculation tax. Really, because from Canadians' perspective, one of the things I love about Canada is that we tend to obey the law here. And we have a provincial government that is attempting to, ideally quickly make some housing available for the number of people who would like to have a home. And having 300 empty houses is awful, absolutely unconscionable. And if I have a chance to say something about it and vote on it and support what I believe is really the intention of this speculation tax, which is fundamentally to change behavior, to just have a little bit of an encouragement here. It's so easy to escape the effect of this tax. How do you do it? Rent your home. Simple as that. And if you don't want to rent your home, then you can probably afford to pay the tax. Fine, in which case it's a progressive tax. I have no problems with very rich people paying to keep their house empty if that's what they choose to do. But I would certainly like to encourage as many people as possible to leave houses with people in it, because that's the community I wish to be part of. I don't want to live in an empty community. So for that reason, even though there may be a couple of issues here, a couple of issues there, I support the intent of this vacant homes tax, and I will not be supporting the motion. Thank you, Councillor Murdoch, for bringing this forward. I'm afraid I can't support it.
Thank you. Councillor Braithwaite, please, Alex, next.
Thank you. It's great to hear everybody's opinion around the table. It's wonderful to have a great discussion like this. I was at a Chamber of Commerce meeting about a month ago, and at that meeting they were talking about the speculation tax. And they actually brought up that there was a BC-wide coalition which was launched, which is called Scrap the Speculation Tax. And it's a campaign that is being put together by Kelowna, Nanaimo, Peachland, Tourism Victoria, and some Canadian home builders. And Tourism Victoria, as I said, and the Chamber were on board with this. And so I listened with interest and read the information with interest. What I would like to say is that I think that I would prefer not to wait till we hear what UBCM and ABICC are going to do, because to me, if we send a letter and we just basically say, we'd like a more thorough review. This might be the tax that we want put in place, but let's have a more thorough review. We might not have all of the information that we need to implement this tax right now. Let's have another look at it. Let's just take a step back and take a sober second look. And then, then maybe we'll be moving forward with something that's a mixture of some of the things that we've heard around this table. So for me, I would like to support moving forward with this and just writing a letter, and then add that letter to all of the other letters that are being sent from all over British Columbia, from the different coalitions that are being put together against this tax. So I would like to support this motion.
Councillor Murdoch, go ahead, and then I'll have a few follow-up remarks to make to what we've heard before. I don't know if you want to speak last or...
You can go next if you wish.
Oh, okay, I'm either way. So, this is a difficult issue because the purpose I accept as described by Councillor Selka, and that is to put people in houses. And it's very difficult to argue against that's a bad thing. I think that's a great thing. And that's what our society is about, right? I think. So the purpose of the tax, I think, is very laudable, very supportable, and it certainly looks like right now there's a majority of BCers, at least in recent surveys, that accept that and like that part of it. The problem I'm having with it, however, and I'm going to get to the specifics of the wording of the motion in a minute, but the problem I'm having is what happens if you have a community where it's not a problem, right? Is it a problem in Oak Bay? Well, anecdotal information that is going around to me isn't strong enough. So I had 3 people contact me, and I spoke to 2 of them, I think, and then one was a letter. And I won't identify them, but I'll talk a little bit about them. One was a fellow who has worked for a long time up in the territories, one of the 3. And it has a real association with Oak Bay. Bought a house a number of years ago, waterfront house. His kids use it when they're in town. He comes down and stays here from time to time, but not the 6 months. He's going to get caught by this. He's near the end of his career. Within a couple of years of retirement, he wants to come in and live there. He's not a speculator. He bought it with a good purpose. I had another fellow who had lived in the house, and his work fortunes took him right now to the States. But he didn't want to sell his house. He'd been there. He'd had it for a long time in his family. And then the other was a septuagenarian couple from Calgary who many years ago had bought a condo because they wanted to spend most of their retirement here. You can understand what part of the year they're here. But they come in the winter, and they participate in our community, and they live in there. But they're just not here 6 months of the year. And they don't want somebody else living in there because then they might have to come back. They might be damaged to it when they come back the following winter. So I'm saying that it's a blunt instrument that's catching some of these people improperly, I think. Then I look at what happened in Vancouver. Vancouver was given the power to decide, is it a problem in your community? And if it is, here's the power to deal with it. The question I have for a province is, why didn't they give us that same power? So each of us can say, it's not a problem, or it is a problem. And if it is a problem, we have a tool to deal with it. And if it's not a problem in our community, we can say, we don't need this tool. And until we see the numbers, and I accept that there's 6 homes that you're aware of that someone told you about, that someone told them about. I accept that, but I'm not sure I accept the Stats Canada version of how many homes there are. I just don't know what to accept. So I can support a general resolution that would say, much like the CRD said, that municipalities should be allowed to opt out of it. And you might even see that there be conditions if it's not a problem, or if they have less than X% of empty houses or whatever. That's what I would like to see. I think all of these, the way this is worded right now, to me, if I could put a spin on it, it's essentially waving a finger or an angry fist at the province, essentially saying, well, you haven't consulted, you haven't defined, you haven't considered this, you have no specific goals, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think that's the way to approve. If we're going to go forward with a letter, it should be a simple letter to saying, we'd like you to consider the ability of a community to opt out. That seems to me a fair middle road. This motion doesn't thread that middle road. This motion is almost as blunt as the act itself or the proposal itself. It just clashes in the same way that I think the proposal for the speculation tax is too blunt an instrument to get at the real problem. This motion doesn't help. So if there would be a motion there to say, let us opt out, I'd be supportive of that. But this one here, just the way it's worded, and for all the other reasons, is I can't support it. So thank you. Councillor Murdoch, please.
Thank you, Mayor, and I'm cognizant of the time here. A couple of points. The $30 million raised, you're right, did go to the city. That is identified in the UBCM report. The speculation tax portion that they put on there or the foreign buyers tax had minimal impact. It dropped prices briefly, and then the speculation was seen as coming back up again. I think there's always going to be problems with implementation of these taxes. I think the cruder, the blunter the instrument, the more difficult that is to have it to achieve the goals. I'm not sure that the specifics I have here are the right answers to that, so I don't mind. In fact, I think the logical, based on the conversation we've had here, is to take out items 3, 5, and 6, so that it really is more generic, and that just asking that the definitions be made more clear, and that we be allowed to exclude ourselves. The CRD motion talks in a broad sense, but of course it was passed by organizations that don't have that power to opt out themselves. I actually stayed away from the option of opting out or asking that we be excluded, because I think that there is merit here, and I share the concerns expressed by Councillors Kirby and Zelka. I think are shared by all of us, that the damage to our communities of vacant homes is unbelievably big. I mean, we die by, I think, even a 2 or 5% vacancy rate if they're permanently vacant homes. Our stores, our commercial areas, our vibrancy all fades very quickly with that happening. So I think we share universally that concern. So the question really comes down to, is this the best, in its current form, the best approach to it? And when I read it, it's very clearly not that well thought through. And fairness, that may come. As the legislation is finalized, these may be defined in a way that is, but the way it's been rolled out makes it appear more like a wealth tax than it does a speculation tax or even a vacancy tax. More of a focus on vacancy, more of a consideration of the details, I think, is needed. I don't think it's our job to rewrite the legislation. I don't need to have all the details of the specific, if it's 4.2% or 5% vacancy. I think we can acknowledge that is a concern, but I think we can just simplify the motion here just to say, and that would end up reading that the UBCM be consulted as part of the policy development, that the definition and measure of vacant homes be clearly defined, and that the specific goals are outlined prior to implementation so that you can measure the effectiveness of the tax. That would be all that was left, and then if a more thorough review of the tax and surrounding policies are not forthcoming, that Oak Bay be excluded from the speculation tax until a more consultative and thorough policy is developed. But I don't see us opting out. I don't think that a clear, we want to opt out message is the best one. I think just writing a letter to say we have real concerns about the way it's done. We want to make sure it's achieving the stated goals. Please, move forward to this with some degree of caution, because you're probably catching people that you don't want. I've heard many of the same stories. There are many situations, as it's worded right now, where perfectly valid people who we want in our community are. Our arts and cultures are built on people coming here with money and sponsoring. You're going to the wall of the side of the Royal and McPherson Theatres. The people who have moved here from Victoria, they brought their money with them and they paid it. And they paid into our community and supported it. We should not be demonizing people who want to do that. I think we have to be very careful that the message that this is sending to people, that they're not welcome. And I think I'm not here to fix that problem. I think I just kind of identify the fact that it's not adequately clear now, and that that we can take those out. So I'll move the motion to modify to take out items 3, 5, and 6 from the items.
Second.
So this is an amendment now. Someone's got to help me here, because can the mover make the amend his own motion in that fashion?
Your Worship, yes.
Okay. So the motion to amend, can you specify that again?
Sure. The motion is to amend is very simple, just to strike items 3, 5, and 6 from the motion.
3, 5, and 6.
So it leaves 1, 2, and 4.
And leaving that last paragraph, if a more thorough review is not forthcoming, we be excluded from it? In other words, we'd be allowed to opt out?
Yeah.
Or okay. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Go ahead. Councillor Kirby, please.
Your Worship, just to be clear, we didn't capture the seconder on that motion.
Yep. There was a seconder, thank you.
I just wanted to refer to the data that I was provided with, just so that you know that I wasn't using just anecdotal evidence,
But you were using the quotation marks.
there was
so
some
I saw that.
anecdotal evidence, yes, but I do have the actual evidence, which is
Okay,
is
let's hear
here in an email. The current incomplete data for Oak Bay, because it's not. It doesn't describe it exactly. They have to leave it vague enough not to be able to identify individuals or individual transactions. And I would like to bring up that maybe we should ask the province to provide us with cumulative annual data on foreign involved transactions, so that we know exactly what's happening in our community. And I might propose that motion at another time, maybe later tonight if we have time. The current incomplete data for Oak Bay shows that from January to September 2017, the percentage of foreign involved transactions is between 4.2% and 9.4%. So if the low end, if there's we don't know what that is because of the varying number. They won't give us a specific number for Oak Bay because it would, they say that there's 4 transactions or less. So we don't know whether it's 4 transactions or 1 transaction. So if it's 4 transactions per month, it's 9.4% of sales. And if it's 1 transaction, it's 4.2% of sales. I can send you look perplexed, but I can send you the email, and you can be in touch with Eric Swanson from Generation Squeeze, who did the research and had some very impressive graphs to look at. And he did show me how when they imposed the 15% foreign buyers tax in Vancouver, how there was a very quick drop in the prices and sales, and then slowly things have crept up, but never quite to the same level. So I think it did have an impact.
Okay.
So this may have an impact. And I can't support the amended motion because it still is conditional. At the end, it still says that we want to be excluded. And I don't think that that's going to help matters. I think we all have to be in on this if we're going to be part of the solution.
Okay, so this is just speaking to the amendment. Let's try to focus on that also. Don't see any other hands. All in favor of the amendment? Opposed? It's defeated. Myself, nay, Zelka, and Kirby opposed. So we're back on the main motion. It's what it is. We ready for that? Okay. Any more discussions on that? Go ahead, Councillor Zelka, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I went to the Ministry of Finance website that has the tax information sheet with respect to the BC speculation tax. And it's very clear on the definition of certain things. With respect to exemptions, all primary residences of British Columbians are exempt from this tax. It makes it a little bit easier to understand that this is only dealing with secondary, non-primary homes. And it makes it very clear that the house needs to be rented for 6 months of the year in 30-day blocks, 30 days or more blocks, to qualify for an exemption on the second home. It also makes it very clear that when they run the numbers, literally 99% of British Columbians will be exempt. It is a focused tax on the 1%. It is unfortunate, or maybe one of the things I love about Oak Bay, that we have a high percentage of the 1% that live here. And it will affect Oak Bay maybe more than others. But I can support that.
Yep.
Very easy to get out of this tax. Rent your home. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Councillor Nave.
So I think this is kind of the problem I have is I don't have enough information in front of me to make a more complete decision. I'm hearing the anecdotal stuff. I don't disbelieve that. I wished I had some numbers in front of me. We've got some data. The other thing is we don't have the analysis from UBCM. I'd like to have that before me. This feels premature. I prefer to. I don't want, as any of you here, a community full of vacant homes. doesn't serve us at all. So I would like to follow this a little bit more. UBCM is going to be consulting with the government, so I'd like to look at that analysis. I'd like to figure out if we can get some reliable data of what's going on in our community. And when that's before us, then I'd like to come back and make this decision about how we move forward regarding the speculation tax. So I think I'm going to vote against this.
Thank you very much. I think we're ready for the vote. All in favor? Opposed? 5 Croft, Jensen, Nay, Zelka, and Kirby opposed. It's defeated. Thank you very much. This has been actually a very, very good discussion, and I thank everyone for doing it, and I thank Councillor Murdoch for raising this issue. It's an important issue for all of us. We know there's an incredible housing shortage throughout British Columbia. I don't know, it was 114,000 units are going to be built over the next 10 years, which is going to make some small impact. We have to accept that, and we have to, I think, certainly agree that we have to accept some of that burden here in Oak Bay. That's going to be up for discussion. But I think the point of the matter is, I think we've had a good community dialogue on this here. I thank the letter writers for their input and the speakers tonight. So this is democracy on display. So thanks for everybody. Now, we're about to adjourn unless someone has a point that they wish to make. Councillor Kirby.
I just wanted to see if there was any appetite for a motion to send a letter to the province requesting that they provide cumulative annual data on foreign involved transactions.
It's asking them for information.
To provide the data.
Do we need a motion for that? Can I just write off and ask them
much.
for that? Mr. Jones?
Your Worship, we'd be quite happy just to ask for that information and
Yeah.
see what we get back.
Yep. Yeah, so or staff will just write off for that. And then we can circulate that, and if that causes a new motion, notice of motion, that's good too. Okay, so we're not going to typically adjourn. We're going to adjourn back into in camera pursuant to the motion that we had right at the beginning. We spent in camera from 6 till just before 7. So do we need to reread? We don't have to reread that motion. We just remake it?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, so it's made, and that's the motion at the top. Is it seconded?
Seconded.
Discussion, all in favor, opposed, not opposed. Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for staying on such a wonderful, warm evening.